Invest in the Context of White Supremacy radio program. Constructive information on what racism, white supremacy is, and how it works. Visit the blog at racism-notes.blogspot.com. That's racism-notes.blogspot.com. PayPal button is in the top right corner. Links for Cash App, Venmo, and PayPal are below. Gus's wish list is at Amazon under Gus T. Renegade.
FBI's racial squad and the LAPD's criminal conspiracy section worked literally hand in hand in bringing down the LA Black Panther Party and its leadership, Pratt in particular.
We went to interview Mumia Abu-Jamal, the Peabody Award-winning journalist. We found him awaiting execution on death row.
In essence, when one looks at the aims and objectives of the federal government through the FBI, by way of the COINTELPRO program, what one really sees is a war against Black America, a war against in the words of the files, in fact, the emergence of a Black Messiah who could lead Black America.
A patient told me, he said he was praying to the melanoid God. I said, I'll have to use that. The melanoid God. So pray to the melanoid God and say, God, help me to like myself. See, help me to like being black. See, help me to like being what you made me, because then you might answer my prayers. See, but imagine us. We were made black, and white supremacy taught us we didn't want to be black. How come you didn't make me white?
Now, the paper that I wrote back in 1969 and presented in 1970 called The Crest Theory of Color Confrontation and Racism. Now, that paper has caused me a little bit of trouble. Fired from university, told by the dean of the College of Medicine that the paper didn't make any sense, and that was why I could not have promotion and tenure. Backed up by the president and the board of trustees. Okay? The paper attempted to discuss this issue of white supremacy at the genetic level. It's a very simple paper. I brought some copies. Anybody wants a copy? They're $3 a piece. Cards cost that much. But the paper attempts to look in about 13 pages. Why would people go into this kind of behavior? And what is the necessity for the behavior?
I got started thinking about racism, and the ideas that came to my mind. I come from a family where people have been political and thinking about political ideas, and I grew up in that environment. And I also grew up in an environment where I think that my parents were training us to complain about things that were not correct. One time the FBI and the Secret Service went to see my mother, asking her about something that I was doing. I was so proud of my mother. She said she raised us to protest. And so they didn't get any help there. I don't know whether they thought she was going to take a broom to me or what. But she said she raised us to protest. But I started thinking more seriously about racism after I had finished medical school and by accident found myself in a training program, a residency training program in psychiatry at St. Elizabeth's Hospital, Washington, D.C.
Context of White Supremacy. Gus T. Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information for non-white people on the global system of white supremacy. Today's date, April 28, Tuesday, 2026. So I have been told, even how aligned we are. Look at this here. Look at this here. Scrolling down. This is FBI report from their file 1571534, talking about the activities of the Center for Black Education in Washington, D.C., scrolling midway down to their report. And what do we have? It's about 13 pages or so. Midway down, what do we find? Informant listed. They give him the branding WFT3, but they have a whole page that lists their informant. So this is informant listed as WFT3. Writes, the Center for Black Education presented Dr. Frances Welsing, a D.C. psychologist at Howard University, on April 28, 1973. How about that for alignment? What is that? 53 years to the day when she was giving her talk as a part of the CBE. The informant WFT3 continues. Dr. Welsing spoke on some of the current problems facing the black community today. 13 people attended in 1973. I'm not sure if this is 13 including myself, the informant, or if there were 13 people and the informant. That is why we're having our broadcast today, to go over why in the world the FBI would be snooping on Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. I thought it would be great, the person that we would get on the broadcast for today, because Dr. Welsing said in her book, The ISIS Papers, that you, white or non-white, are not qualified to speak about racism, white supremacy at all. Zip it. If you have not read our guest for today's broadcast, his book, he's written several, but specifically his book, Racial Matters, the FBI's secret file on Black America from 1960 to 1972. I think it is important that I just said the date of that report, FBI informant peeping on Dr. Welsing. That was dated 1973, April 28, specifically after the date the book ends, 1972. FBI is supposed to be cleaning up their act and doing better, and in addition to Racial Matters, and if you've not read that book, hey, the cows, we hooked you up. We've had Dr. O'Reilly as a guest on our broadcast twice. We've spoken about this book in great detail. Get your copy and get to it. Additionally, we actually had our guest for today's broadcast. We've had him on the broadcast before, not just to discuss racial matters. We also discussed Nixon's piano, presidents, and politics from Washington. Nixon's piano, presidents, and racial politics from Washington to Clinton. Fascinating book, and in fact, that was originally my thought process for why I wanted to get him back on as a guest today, specifically to discuss JFK and his conduct. Was he racist? Even JFK's connection to some of the COINTELPRO operations. But all of that got pushed way to the back burner once I began making some of those FOIA requests, as we should all be doing. And I actually started getting some of these documents about Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, and wow, seeing how long she was under surveillance and informants, all of it, and the coding on these documents. Oh yeah, we should definitely get Dr. O'Reilly back with us to help decipher some of these codes and even help explain why someone like Dr. Welsing would be a target. Joining us for this his fourth time on the broadcast. We had him way back when the cows first started out in 2009. Had him back again to discuss Nixon's Piano, which is a book I do mention quite a bit, those minstrel shows and all. Whew, man. Anyway, but we had him back in 2022 just after the passing of Bill Russell, like really important moments when he came back to chat with us, and now this time to who better to discuss the FBI files on Dr. Francis Cress Welsing than our guest for the fourth time, Dr. Kenneth O'Reilly. Dr. O'Reilly, are you with us, sir?
I am, yes.
Ah, awesome. Okay. We can hear you on the broadcast line. Grand, Dr. O'Reilly. And I think when we couldn't hear you before, you were going to start us off addressing the intro that I gave, sir?
Yeah, just some background information. That FBI document you read from, that's in you said 157, and that's an FBI file classification. And the classification is called Extremist Matters / Civil Unrest. And it's interesting that the Center for Black Education has a file, because the 157 category is also the number under which the FBI ran its counterintelligence program against the Ku Klux Klan and other white hate groups, white extremist groups. And so that's a pretty big net under that 157 category that the FBI cast. And then secondly, you mentioned an informant, WFT3. And in all likelihood, that's a Washington field office, FBI Washington field office informant with the code name T3. And likely, but not necessarily, that's a human being. But again, it's not a de facto proof that it's a human being. It could be a microphone recording, it could be a tape recording, it could be a wiretap, although it's a public meeting, so it's hard to say, but probably, yeah, a human being. But the FBI uses code designations for informants of all types: wiretaps, microphones, break-ins, human beings, and so on. And the third thing I'd like to say, because Dr. Welsing published the Crest theory of color confrontation in 1974. And that's really kind of interesting for two reasons. First, she was denied tenure at Howard University, largely because of that book in June, or not book, that article in June 1975. And so that, and the question there is, did the FBI have anything to do with that? And again, I have no idea, but that would be something to explore. Did the Bureau try to get her fired? And then secondly, she published her big book, right, the ISIS Papers, in 1992. And her argument, of course, looks to genetics and, racial superiority, inferiority, all that. And what's interesting about that is 2 years later, you have Richard Herrnstein and Charles Murray publishing The Bell Curve, which, from a completely different perspective, also gets into genetics and racial superiority, inferiority, and all that. And so right there in the early 90s, those two books come out. And, of course, the Charles Murray book, The Bell Curve, I mean, that created a huge uproar in the U.S. All right, that's all I have for it, just some background information. But I have one question right off the bat. Can you tell, looking at that document, that file number 157, that's the category, extremist civil unrest. But the file number under that category is 15364. And is that the file number for the Center for Black Education?
That's why I wanted to have you on the broadcast, sir, because I'm very ignorant about all of these codes. But from my perspective,
it generally would have a caption up top of the document, and it would like a classic example, Martin Luther King's file. His file number is 100. That's the category, right? Subversive activities, and his specific file number under category 100 is 106670. And then after that, you would have -1 and then -2, because each document in the file would have be numbered consecutively. And so what I'm guessing here is that 15364, that's the file number for the Center for Black Education.
That's
I don't know. After we get done here, maybe you could you could email me that, and then I could give you some more specific advice about what to look for.
For sure. To your point, it looks like for this specific report, so it looks like the page 2 in the report, it's got a cover sheet, and then page 2, Airtel to SAC, Special Agent in Charge, I guess, Baltimore, regarding Center for Black Education, and then it's got that code 157-15364. So I think yes.
And what about page 1? Do you have page 1 in front of you?
Page 1, it says Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Right. Look up at the top. There should be a caption, like remember the movie Mississippi Burning?
Yes, sir.
Remember that with Gene Hackman and Willem Dafoe and all the Ku Klux Klan, the murder of Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman, right, in Neshoba County, Mississippi. All right. Every file for that FBI case, up at the top, you would see the word "my burn." And that's short for "my Mississippi burn," for the burning of a church in Mississippi. And that's where that whole case and those Ku Klux Klan murders began, because those 3 young guys were down there investigating the burning of a church. And so up at the top of the document, you've got the caption, "my burn," and that's the "my burn" file. And so no matter what you're looking at with the FBI, you're going to have a category, in this case, 157, in Martin Luther King's case, 100. And then after that, specific file number of the subject of the investigation.
Okay. For this one, the caption that's repeated on every page is the number, or it's the full caption is WFO. I'm told that's Washington Field Office. I think you said that too.
Correct.
And then the number is 157-2619. That's on every page.
Okay, so that's the 2619. All right, so that's the individual file under the category 157.
Okay.
And is there a name? Is there a name on the first page up top?
Center for Black Education.
Person, that's the file. 157-2619. That's the FBI file on the Center for Black Education.
Okay.
That's what it sounds like to me.
I read the first page from this and I just told you, so Dr. Welsing, she had her presentation on the 28th of April as a part of this, but the first page from this, I even have to go back because this document has so much. So to your point about the informants, this is on page 4, has the same caption that I just read to you, the Washington Field Office 157-2619, says, Washington Field Office has previously conducted investigation regarding the following Washington, D.C. individuals mentioned in instant report, and it lists 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, informants, and then it gives their location as to where they are, and talking about all of the different information that they've provided, and then their names and locations are all redacted. So what do you think? These might be actual people?
And remember, those informants could be human beings who would receive payment, or they could be a wiretap, a microphone, or a break-in. Again, something almost everybody's familiar with. Martin Luther King.
The break-in?
The FBI, the FBI uses human informants when spying on Dr. King, but they also use wiretaps and microphones.
And the break-in?
And they would all have, for King, I'm not sure, but to plant a microphone, you have to have a break-in by definition, right? You don't have to go into a motel room to wiretap a motel telephone, but to plant a microphone in a motel room, yeah, you by definition you have to break in.
I had not.
And the Bureau called the Bureau called those black bag jobs.
I had not considered so sometimes if they've done a break-in, they have a microphone or some other recording or what have you, sometimes they'll list that as the informant in the reports.
Correct. And see, informant T3, you mentioned that number.
Yes,
that
sir.
Could be a human being, but it could also be a wiretap. But in the context of what you read, almost certainly that's a human being.
Okay.
But again, you when you see a T3 or T81 or whatever, you just can't assume in every case that it's a human being. But the context can often tell you, yeah, it's a human being, or the context can tell you it's a wiretap. I was just doing some research on a civil rights lawyer named Joe Rao, and he was talking to the guy named Gardner Jackson. I'm doing a biography of him now. And yeah, there's an FBI informant recording, talking about their conversation, but it was a telephone conversation. So what do we assume there? We assume the informant's a wiretap.
Fascinating. Wow. Okay. This is page 1 from that same report, just so that you have more context of what's going on here. So it reads, Walter Lively, who I'd never heard of in my life, as he is the reported owner of the property, Baltimore should intensify investigation of Lively and resolve his plans for use of this farm. Baltimore should carefully review the results of this investigation and submit a recommendation to the Bureau regarding an interview with Walter Lively. The results of the investigation concerning activities on the Walter Lively farm should be furnished to the Bureau by LHM under the caption of Walter Lively. Pittsburgh should intensify coverage of activities of the Lively farm and make every attempt to identify those individuals engaging in target practice. An attempt should be made to develop additional sources in a position to provide information regarding activities on the Lively farm. And it talks about the All African People's Revolutionary Party, AAPRP. I guess they have a file too, but all of that's on page 1 for why this needs to be justified. I had never heard of any of these people.
No. Okay. First of all, you mentioned LHM. That's an LHM stands for Letterhead Memoranda or Memorandum. And what that means is the FBI would type up a report and call it a letterhead memoranda and then send it to other government agencies. And the FBI also would have what they call blind memoranda, where they type up documents and then leak them without any markings indicating that it's an FBI document, leak them to, friendly media people and so forth. All right, now Walter Lively. It sounds to me like what the FBI is doing here is cultivating a source. They're seeing if they can, turn him into an informant. And you also mentioned, what was it? Target practice on his farm. All right. So here you have the way the FBI thinks, and back then the way a lot of people thought. You have young black guys, I assume they're mostly men, shooting guns on a farm. And so for the FBI, this is, what are we going to have? Are we going to have a revolution? Are we going to have a Mau Mau? And so that's why these documents are under the 157 category. For the FBI, this is extremist, this is civil unrest. And of course, it's ironic, especially if you look at the climate of opinion in the United States today, in that everything is guns, 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 right? The Second Amendment is a sacred right. But when what Huey and Bobby pick up shotguns, or these guys on Walter Lively's farm are shooting at targets, and suddenly it's extremist, it's civil unrest, and so that it's like gun control, but gun control for you and not for me.
Pattern of that in the system of white supremacy. In fact, there's a special note at the bottom of the page that it's underlined in all capital letters, and it reads, "In recent years, information has been received that gunfire, possibly from automatic weapons, occurred on the Walter Lively farm. Negro men, women, and children have been observed at the Lively farm, and some of these people have engaged in target practice. Walter Lively purchased the farm 2 years ago, but seldom visits the property. Instructions to interested officers are necessary in order to ensure investigation regarding these activities is centered in the Walter Lively file."
He no doubt Walter Lively has an FBI file. If I remember right, he's a Baltimore guy, and he was a socialist, I think, Norman Thomas's Socialist Party. You can probably Google him, I would bet. I'd bet a nickel you can Google him. But again, I'm not sure. After we're done here tonight, I'm going to do a little research on him and find out what his story is.
Me too.
But again, anytime you have black people and guns, the FBI is going to go nuts, especially in that era.
Fast, I suspect even now. I'm seeing them.
I mean, we here in Wisconsin, we had that Kyle Rittenhouse. He had this teenager running around AR-15, right? And the police, they just give him a salute and let him run around with a semi-automatic weapon. And if he was a black teenager, I doubt they would let that happen. In other words, if he was a black teenager, they probably would have shot him.
I think he could have been a black elderly person, a black middle-aged person.
That's right, yeah.
I don't think being a teen, that wouldn't have helped either. But, that's why I said, because I know these numbers are significant. The 157, that's on all of them. I thought, it would be really important just even to backtrack a little bit. As I understand it, the JFK Assassination Records Review Board, they have looked at all of these files regarding the FBI and their counterintelligence programs and such, and they've concluded that these are also JFK records. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. Here, let me just check something here real quick so I just don't make a mistake.
Strive for accuracy.
I just don't know about that. The Kennedy files are it's absolutely enormous because, conspiracy theories recirculate every few years. And then you have the files are sealed for a certain amount of years and then they're released again. And the same thing with Martin Luther King files. Every now and then you have a big document dump on them. But in terms of your specific question, I can't really answer that. I think the FBI file number for the Kennedy assassination, if memory serves me, I think it's 62. And that's like miscellaneous subversive activities category. But again, I'm not sure of that either, but I'm pretty sure. And by the way, have you ever heard of the Osage Indian murders?
I'm not super familiar.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That was in Oklahoma. It had to do with oil money and rich Native American Osage Indian women who were widows. They're sitting on all this oil money, and so white guys basically marry them and then murder them, so they can become rich oil men. It was, that was a 62 file category as well, and that's over 100 years ago. And so you can see how broad these FBI file categories are, and that the Osage Indian murders back in the 1920s, right, over 100 years ago, that's a 62 classification. The assassination of John Kennedy is also a 62 classification. And how we started this discussion, right? Category 157, extremist matters, civil unrest. Yeah, the Center for Black Education in Washington, D.C., it's under that header. But so is the FBI counterintelligence program against the Klan under the same header. And so again, these file categories, they're all far-ranging.
Deliberately so.
Well, but you have to understand the FBI is a bureaucracy, and bureaucracies essentially control things with numbers. You have a file number, you have a case number, and then you have serial numbers. And that way, you as a bureaucrat, you can exert control over whatever file you're in charge of. And so again, the category number, the individual file number, and then the serial number. And the serial numbers are like page numbers. You know, page 1, page 2, page 3. And the reason you have those is so you know you can tell if something hinky is going on. So you're reading the file and you get to serial number 1, then 2, number 3, number 4, and then number 16.
I see.
What happened to the documents between number 4 and number 16? See, on the other hand, the FBI during the Hoover era, today too, to a degree, is pretty shifty. And so sometimes when they wanted to hide things, they would not give them serial numbers. And those are called do not file files. And if there's no number, it doesn't exist. You see how that works? See, in this file, 157-15364, the Center for Black Education, Washington, D.C. file, you can ask for that. And you can see each individual serial number. But the FBI also has files that they again, to repeat myself, they call do not file files that don't have numbers.
It would be difficult to ask for a file with no number.
Well, it's too difficult. Yeah, well, that's the whole point. The whole point is to keep them so secret that they never get publicly exposed. But again, no system is foolproof, and so we learn about the do not file files precisely for the same reason they exist, because the bureaucracy needs to control whatever it's doing. And so the FBI set up bureaucratic procedures to control its do not file files. I mean, it just makes your head hurt just thinking about it. But
indeed.
But that's where we end up.
Okay, let's make sure. I want to try and get as much information while we have you. So they sent me a different document. And even for accuracy, Dr. Welsing's Cress theory of color confrontation, she said that she actually wrote that document in 1969 and then had it published in 1970. So I'm sure that's important for the FBI tracking her.
I think in 74 she published it. She might have circulated. Well, it's hard to say. Was it published? Was it circulated? Was it reprinted in scholarly journals? But again, as I said earlier, what's interesting about that is, you know, it's certainly widespread in 1974, and then the very next year she denied tenure and she's fired.
Okay, so this, to your point, this document is from August 1974, 1 year before she's terminated from Howard University, and certainly by...
Yeah, she terminated in June 75, and she claimed she was an assistant professor of pediatrics, and she has an MD in psychiatry. And she claimed she was fired because of her theory. And her theory, she said, and this is true, has actually nothing to do with her job performance as an assistant professor of pediatrics. So she saw this as just, you know, blatant discrimination, retaliation, and all that.
Could be government.
Well, her theory is very controversial, and Howard probably just didn't want anything to do with her theory or her, and so they did the easy thing. You're not getting tenure.
Could have been FBI involvement as well. Who knows?
Well, that's you would. It's possible, certainly, but we have to remember that FBI today and the FBI back then is not omnipotent. We're not talking about the Baltimore Catechism here, right? The FBI is not omniscient and omnipotent, all-powerful, all-knowing. And so there are limits to what it can do. And by the way, we see that now. I mean, you look at what's going on in the United States right now with the Trump administration and ICE and all that stuff. What they want to do and what they're able to do are two different things, because they simply don't have the horses.
I don't know. With regards to this context and this time period, when the FBI in their programs and government agencies are either being accused of being directly involved or indirectly involved with killing people because they have controversial views against racism, getting someone fired does not quite require omnipotence, and particularly getting someone fired. The FBI's headquarters. Hang on one second. Hang on. The FBI headquarters is in Washington, D.C. Howard just happens to be in D.C., so for this one, we don't even need a big travel budget. We could probably walk and get this done. So that is all important context for this.
Right, but that doesn't mean the FBI was involved.
I didn't say that. I said it's possible, and I think you did too.
Yeah, exactly. It's possible.
Can I get to the document then? Let me add a little bit more then before we get off into the maybe nots and all that, since I said it's possible to begin with. This is from 1974, and the code on this document is SI, I think this is Springfield, Illinois office, 157-1060. That's the lead code on the document. And then I thought, importantly, this one, it says memorandum. The top listing on this one is Director, FBI, and the code changes. This time it's 157-12183. I said, whoa, so the Director of the FBI is getting this, like, directly to check on what black people are up to?
All right. Okay. What we've got here are two things. First, cross-filing.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at an FBI document, there's a main file that document is part of. But copies of that document might be cross-filed in three or four dozen other files. And so when you see two numbers under the 157 category, one of those numbers sounds like the main file, and then the other number sounds like it's cross-filed in that file. Another possibility is that you have headquarters files, and then you have field office files. And SI, I don't know what that is, but that's a good guess, Springfield field office in Illinois. Okay. And then,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And my second point, which I can't remember, I lost my train of thought. Could you repeat what you said earlier?
Yes, sir. So the first page, I think it might be Springfield office, and so they have that code, and then it drops down the Director. So you were saying it's cross-filed.
Okay, all right, I got it now. All right, now when an FBI document that says, like, I'm in Milwaukee, so SAC Milwaukee to Director. What that means is the Milwaukee field office is sending a document to FBI headquarters in Washington. It does not mean in this era, this is a Clarence Kelly era, not the J. Edgar Hoover era we're talking about. It doesn't mean the FBI director himself saw it. It simply means the document came into headquarters. Now, to tell if J. Edgar Hoover or Clarence Kelly or whoever actually saw a document, there's two ways of checking that. One is scribble. And you might see on a document a scribble, OKH. And that means J. Edgar Hoover read it and he marked it. He put his OK on it, and he put his initial on it, H. That's one way to tell if the big wigs at the FBI had actually seen a document. The other way is if you see names, actual names, like, Clyde Tolson to J. Edgar Hoover, Louis B. Nichols to Arthur DeLoach, or William Sullivan to Fred Baumgartner. These are real senior people in the Hoover era. And if their names are on the document, to and from, then the real big wigs saw this document. But if you just have, SAC Milwaukee to director, that just means the document went from the Milwaukee office to headquarters. And it doesn't mean Hoover saw it. And if you use, think about it, commonsensically, there are like, 20,000 pages of documents going into the FBI headquarters building every day. And J. Edgar Hoover or Clarence Kelly, whoever the director is, they're not going to be reading 20,000 pages a day, are they? And so what happens, all this stuff comes in to Washington, and only a fraction of it makes it to the desks of the bigwigs, the FBI director and his senior aides. So we have to be careful of that. Just because you see director doesn't mean J. Edgar Hoover read this document.
This is after, I think Mr. Hoover had passed on by this time, but for sure it doesn't mean the director got it.
He died in 72. Clarence Kelly is, I think, in 74. He'd be the director.
Okay. So let's share a teaspoon of this, keeping that in mind. We don't know if the director actually saw it, but it is routed to the director's office. So this document, It reads, "The Voice of the Black Community, Decatur, Illinois." Enclosed for the Bureau are one copy of The Voice of the Black Community, Volume 1, Issue Number 28, Decatur, Illinois, dated Friday, July 12, 1974, and one copy of The Voice of the Black Community, Volume 1, Issue Number 29, dated Friday, July 26. Volume 1, Issue Number 28, dated July 12, contains an article beginning in Section 1, page 8, written allegedly by Francis Cress Welsing, M.D., child and general psychiatrist, assistant professor of pediatrics at Howard University, Washington, D.C., with regard to racism. The article revealed that the study is entitled Cress Theory of Color Confrontation and Racism. According to the article, the study lays to rest many false assumptions that have existed down through the years. The article alleges to explain in a scholarly manner the confrontation between whites and non-whites in the world. And he goes on to talk about Jesse Jackson, the late Jesse Jackson's article in the same report. Why would this be something they want to keep tabs on?
Well, because their interest is generic. It's in my Racial Matters book. I think last time or 2 times ago when I was on your show, we talked about something that I call in the Racial Matters book community surveillance. And what that means is the FBI spied on Martin Luther King, the Prince of Nonviolence. They spied on Malcolm X, the so-called Prince of Violence. And guess what? Everybody in between. And so the FBI was basically interested in Black America, not just civil rights leaders, not just prominent people. They're interested in regular, everyday, ordinary African Americans. Now, you mentioned this publication reporting on Dr. Welsing, and the FBI is part of this community surveillance. Yeah, they kept track of Black newspapers, Black newsletters, Black pamphlets, Black broadsides, Black posters, the whole kit and caboodle. And, of course, that's outrageous. But as a historian, the FBI also has compiled an amazing array of sources about social history in our country. Because who else is collecting all this stuff except these spies who are acting like a giant vacuum cleaner and sucking all this stuff up? but it also, and again, it has a nefarious purpose, right? They want to spy on people. That's not good. But it also creates a rich record of social history. And that doesn't mean you believe everything you read in FBI files. As an historian, you have to, no matter what your source is, you have to verify your source and test the integrity of sources. But regardless, I mean, a lot of the stuff just, like a black newsletter in Springfield or Decatur, Illinois from 1974, where else does that exist except in FBI files? And so the fact that the FBI is culling information from these type of sources, that tells you something about the FBI. But the sources themselves also tell you what it was like to be a black American in Decatur, Illinois in 1974. Again, but you always have to remember, you have to always check the integrity of your sources, no matter if the source is Gandhi or the source is J. Edgar Hoover or Clarence Kelly.
Important context of white supremacy.
Yeah. Now, one more thing before you ask your next question. It sounds to me like you put in a Freedom of Information Act request for Dr. Welsing. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and it sounds like what the FBI did is they picked up references to Dr. Welsing in an array of files. But so far, at least, it doesn't sound like that the FBI had a central file on her.
Well, we
or
don't
maybe
know.
They just didn't release it. Yeah, that's right. Maybe it's buried somewhere.
I'm going to go back to the letter that they, this batch was in. Oh, yeah. This isn't even. I even have to pause. This is not everything. Now, if we had waited and done this program in 30, it's so ridiculous. Today, I literally have the receipt. They told me this is not everything. This is just like stuff that they had processed already. But they said there are other files. We haven't processed them all. Maybe we'll do it if you ask us. Yeah. If you don't ask us, we're not going to do it. So, of course, I asked them. In the process, they emailed me back and told me, oh, by the way, we actually did find another like 50 pages. Maybe we'll process those if you ask us. So I paid for them today, got the receipt. So they said, okay, give us, we'll try to do it as quickly as possible, maybe 30 days. So
and they haven't bumped you over to the National Archives, because a lot of the FBI files are not physically in the FBI's possession anymore. They're in the National Archives.
Oh, they did, and they have Dr. Welsing stuff there as well. So. Yeah. They said they're kind of spread, like you were saying, they have different field offices, so that sort of thing. But yes, it's difficult to say, but there are more Dr. Welsing files, and I should have at least some of them shortly, very shortly.
Yeah, but so far, now we don't know what will happen when they do respond and get quote unquote everything to you. But so far, it sounds like she's basically a walk-in into these other files, like. She gets mentioned in dozens and dozens of files, but so far, at least, I don't see a central file on her.
So far, will be interesting to continue checking. But one thing that I did find, I guess the one of the more fascinating things that I found very early on, and in the batch that they did not send to me, what was interesting that they told me. We were trying to guess when this surveillance started, because from right now, the reports that I have, she's on the radar 1973. So I said at least by 73, she's got things in their files. From the files that they told me they're in the process of sending me, they started surveillance on her in 1954. She was 19 at the time. Like, no crest theory. She's not a doctor. Like, why would they be snooping on a black girl from Chicago?
Yeah. Right. As a historian, that's the exact type of question I would really be interested in.
Oh, man. I wanted an answer from you, Dr. O'Reilly, not...
Well, I mean, I don't know what she was doing in Chicago in 54. One of her parents was a school teacher, right?
Yes, sir. Her mom.
And so her mom was probably in the union, teacher union, and maybe the FBI picked her up on a picket line or something like that.
You talking about her mom?
I'm just guessing. No. I mean, her mom's a teacher, and her mom's out there on the picket line, and she's got a teenage daughter. The teenage daughter's out on the picket line with her, right? Because the mom's got to feed the daughter, and you do that by getting a raise. So, but that's just speculation. But it's probably something like that. That
her dad was a doctor. Does that mean anything? Dr. Welsing's dad was also a doctor?
Well, a medical doctor, yeah. It could be because, the FBI was interested in, again, everyday black people, but they were also interested in prominent black citizens. And Chicago is, one of the black meccas. And so, yeah, anybody who's black and prominent in Chicago, that probably would attract some FBI interest. But again, you have to remember, they're not omnipotent and omniscient. They don't have the horses to literally spy on everybody. And so what the Bureau tries to do, and this was true in the J. Edgar Hoover era, it's true today, is make you think they can spy on everybody. It's like ICE. ICE, right now, right, rounding up immigrants, deporting them, it's horrific. But ICE does not have the horses to deport everybody. But it can, through, theater, scare everybody and make everybody think, everybody's vulnerable, everybody can be deported. There's something actually called file envy, and that a lot of people in my generation, the 60s, early 70s, were active in, civil rights, black power, anti-Vietnam War movements, the movement to get rid of Nixon, all that stuff. And so we're out marching and protesting and all that stuff. And my generation, when we put in for our own FBI files, it's like crushing, because so many of us learned that the FBI didn't have a file on us. It's like a blow to our egos. But it just goes to show you that no matter how broad government surveillance is, the main purpose of it is to scare everybody, not to, target everybody for a counterintelligence operation. They just don't have the manpower to do that, thank God.
Enough to snoop on a teenage black girl in Chicago is certainly...
Right, what's up with that? I mean, geez. Now, do you remember when Martin Luther King was assassinated? He was in Memphis for a garbage man strike, right? Mm-hmm. And in Memphis at the time, there were a lot of protests and marches and all that stuff. And the FBI was keeping track of children who were out there on the picket lines and stuff. So if they were doing that in Memphis in, 1968, maybe they were doing it in Chicago in 1954. And
to the best of your...
Up a 19-year-old black woman, yeah.
Black girl, she's not even, 19. To the best of your recollection, do you remember when Dr. King comes on the FBI radar? When they start tracking him?
Not exactly, but certainly by the time the Montgomery bus boycott gets off the ground. And so you're talking like 1955. But King was fairly, apolitical. Daddy King was apolitical, right? I mean, Daddy King had Martin Luther King Jr. Dancing as a pickaninny on the stage before the premiere of Gone with the Wind in Atlanta, Georgia. Right, Margaret Mitchell's book turned into a movie, and so King was not really a politically involved figure. And by the way, he wasn't the first choice. Rosa Parks and Virginia Durr and E.D. Nixon and what's her name? Oh yeah, Ella Baker. They didn't go to Martin Luther King first, but he was the one who said, I'll be the public face of the Montgomery bus boycott. They went to a whole bunch of other preachers first, and they wanted the churches involved, so they wanted a preacher. But all the preachers with status told him no. And Martin Luther King, a young guy, he said, "What the hell? Sure, I'll do it." And suddenly he just blows up instantly. So I would assume there's not much, if anything, before the. But again, that's something I'll check out after we're done tonight.
Oh, okay. I'd be interested. Maybe they were snooping around on him in grade school, like he got potential. We got to keep an eye.
Yeah. As they say in France, anything's possible, but it's unlikely.
Okay. They included this. This is, I guess, their response letter, and then they had the documents to it. But within their response letter, it reads, per Dr. Welsing, my request, documents or information referred to other government agencies were not included in this release. What do you make of that?
Well, if the FBI sent a document in which Dr. Welsing is mentioned, if they sent that document to the State Department, the CIA, the Army, whatever, before they can release it to you, they have to get the other agency to okay the release. So that causes a delay. So that's pretty simple to understand. But it's basically a stalling tactic. But legally, the Freedom of Information Act allows that. And so, and the purpose, whether you think the purpose is ridiculous or not, the purpose is to make sure that the FBI, in releasing a document, is not compromising something that the CIA thinks should be secret, or military intelligence, or the State Department. So anything that goes from the FBI to another agency has to be cleared by that other agency, and that causes a delay.
Sometimes intentional, perhaps.
Sometimes they try to dance around this stuff. It's the wait time now is for FOIA stuff is just 2 years minimum, unless you have something that is, really, really of public importance. For instance, Trump's ballroom. If you want to get government records about the cost overruns on government ballroom, you can really make a case to go to the head of the line and get those documents released, because a lot of millions of people are interested in that, and they're interested in that right now. Whereas you don't have millions of people demanding Dr. Welsing's FBI file be released, and so you just got to wait your turn, and it literally it'll take years. When did you first file?
Earlier this year.
Oh, well, that's remarkable that you're getting that stuff that quickly. And that might be because you have an audience, because you've got a podcast. And so maybe the Bureau indicates that there's some public interest here. But that's remarkable to get stuff that quickly. I mean, from my perspective, that's like miraculous.
I didn't think it was a miracle, sir, but all right. I still don't.
I mean, the first big FBI file I got was the FBI file on the House Un-American Activities Committee. And that's the committee that Nixon started out on, right? The Alger Hiss case.
Oh, that's right in our time period,
10,
man.
Yeah, Hollywood 10 blacklist, all that stuff. And I think that was 4 years.
What?
For me to get that file.
When did you?
Yeah.
What?
Well, yeah, I applied for it. Then it was a big file, so then I had to agree to pay for it.
How much did it cost?
Well, it was about $4,000.
Jesus Christ!
This was like in 1970. I put in for it in like 1977, and so $4,000 then is what that's about $15,000 now. And I got some fee reduction, but I didn't get a waiver.
Jesus.
Well, I mean, it's and it doesn't get any easier, right? Remember Doge, Elon Musk?
Right.
Department of Government. Yeah, they're cutting everything, including people who process FOIA requests. It's not going to be any easier.
That is a part of the obstacle right there, though. He said 4 years and 4,000. Jesus. Woo.
Yeah, but again, part of that was my own fault for not being rich. If I was rich, I'd say, yeah, go do it right away. So I had to raise the money.
Jesus.
When you're a graduate student, you might not have $4, let alone $4,000.
I hear you. That is a hefty price to have to, man, for documents that are public. One of these files for Dr. Welsing, this is from 1973, and this is the one where they had the informants for the Lively Farm. I forgot to include, so ignorant of me, I didn't go all the way down to the bottom page. So this file, it did go to the Bureau. This file also got sent to the Secret Service, and this file, they have the Washington field office, and they have 2 or actually 5 copies, I guess, that went to the Bureau. Now, again, this is black people with guns. Like, was it that anything black people with guns? Secret Services got to get this. This could be a threat to national security.
Yeah. That's guns. Yeah, it's going to go to Secret Service. That's not a big surprise. And it will go elsewhere because, again, cross-filing. Again, if you say there's a wiretap on you, I'm talking to you right now. So the FBI has a wiretap on you. They have a main file on you. But I'm talking to you right now. So I'm going to be cross-referenced in your file. And whoever you have on your show tomorrow, they're going to be cross-referenced. And of course, this is hypothetical, but that's how it works. And so you have all of this massive file system, and the FBI wants to be able to find whoever in the file system, even if they don't have an individual file on that person or that organization. And so everything is cross-referenced. And again, that sounds like what the FBI's interest in Dr. Welsing is. It sounds like she's cross-referenced in dozens and maybe even hundreds of files. And she may or may not have a central file on herself. We don't know that yet. I would guess she does. But again, we can't know that for sure until one turns up. In other words, a 157 1024 Dr. Welsing. It will say that right at the top of the file. Then you know it's her file, rather than her being cross-referenced in other people's files or other organizational files.
I see.
Yeah, let me give you a crazy example of this.
Mm-hmm.
The principal way we found out that the FBI was wiretapping Martin Luther King was because of Muhammad Ali in the draft evasion case. Right? Muhammad Ali said, I ain't got no quarrel with them Vietcong. So he refused to be drafted. And, of course, he had lawyers. And, the case kind of pokes along. And suddenly the government has to admit that Muhammad Ali was overheard on an FBI wiretap. All right. And so Muhammad Ali's lawyers say, well, the government wiretap Muhammad Ali? And the government says, no, we didn't wiretap Muhammad Ali. He was just overheard on a wiretap. And so the next question, Muhammad Ali's lawyers said, well, who did you wiretap that he was overheard on? And Martin Luther King. See how that works? The government wiretapped Martin Luther King. He's on the telephone with Muhammad Ali. And so Muhammad Ali's in the files for that reason. And the only reason we know that is Muhammad Ali, because he's Muhammad Ali. He had good lawyers. And they asked, did you wiretap our client? And so the FBI had to look. And they find out, well, we didn't wiretap him, but we did pick him up on other wiretaps, including the wiretap on Martin Luther King.
Wow.
And if you really like irony, Martin Luther King is also on the phone with John Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, right? Not RFK Jr., but his father. Martin Luther King's on the phone with Lyndon Johnson. And so if you're wiretapping Martin Luther King, you're also picking up the President of the United States, aren't you? Because he's on the other end of the line.
It's crazy. That is crazy.
Well, it's surveillance, and and the real irony here is if you look at Black America, whether civil rights leaders or everyday Black people in Detroit, that's where I went to college in Detroit. The FBI, it's liberals often, John Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, the Democratic Party, are more interested in what Black America is up to than the Republicans, the conservatives, because Black people are a big voting bloc for the Democratic Party. And the Democrats don't want a voting bloc causing trouble for them. So they want to be one step ahead of the curve. And so, John Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson are more interested in spying on Black people than Richard Nixon was. That's not a defense of Richard Nixon on the color line or any other line. It's just the political parties are different. They have different voting blocs. And for the Democratic Party, Black America is a voting bloc, and they want to know what their voters are up to. And thus, Kennedy and Johnson, they looked at FBI as a helpful tool for keeping tabs on one of their biggest voting blocs.
This was what we were originally, literally, this was what I had contacted Dr. O'Reilly to discuss after James the Eugenio fussed at me, and you're going to love JFK, and he loved Black people, and he was against racism, and he didn't do nothing racist. And I said, wait a minute, we read Nixon's Piano, and I got this whole chapter here talking about him calling John Lewis and the Snick sons of bitches and everything. He got really hot with me, but then I got those documents that I didn't think I was going to get them so quickly, so this took precedence, but...
But if you think about it, imagine yourself. You're a president of the United States. You're John Kennedy in 1961, 1962, and you want to get reelected. To get reelected as a Democrat back then, you need the votes of Black people up north, not down south, because generally Black people can't vote down south back then, right? But you need the votes of Black people up north, but you also need the votes of white people down south, white racists. Otherwise, you don't win. And who wins? Barry Goldwater, right? Richard Nixon. And so if you look at, someone like John Kennedy, he's pretty cold on at least till the end. He did put up the Civil Rights Bill of 1963, which became the Civil Rights Act of 1964, a major piece of legislation. So he did come around. But before he came around, he was pretty cold. And what he was trying to do was, walk a tightrope. I need put it in extreme terms, I need the votes of Roy Wilkins and the NAACP, but I also need the votes of Dynamite Bob Chambliss and the Ku Klux Klan. Now, I just said that. That's an extreme example, but it makes the point that for a Democratic Party politician to win, they need Black voters and they need white Southern voters. And if you think about it, doesn't that make sense? Because today, why do the Republicans do so well in presidential elections? Because of the Electoral College, right? And that's a built-in advantage for the Republicans, but also because white people down south no longer vote Democratic. They vote Republican. And see, that's what John Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson were worried about. If we lose the white South, then who wins elections?
Very respectfully, that to me does not exactly equate to so-called coming around, no longer practicing racism, especially for John Kennedy. But I do want to pivot back because the documents I got are way more important than JFK's racism from 60 years ago. If you could help, one, talking about specific code, this is not related to Dr. Welsing, but I do think it's important for a lot of the things that you just mentioned. And one of our previous guests on the program multiple times, in fact, the late, great Dick Gregory, I knew he had an FBI file and I'd seen some of his documents before. He has his own code, apparently, 157, there it is again, 775. And they have him in one of the documents that I got. It's like, wow, can you just get the whole Dick Gregory, put that code in, give me that whole file to see all the wild things they had to say about Dick Gregory? And then above that, oh, wait a minute, I should give you this document. So this document is 1972, same time period, basically. Acting Director, FBI. I think this is right after J.F. Hoover died. This is Springfield Field Office 157-1060, and then in parentheses it has a P. So this is also the voice of the black community, Decatur, Illinois, I just said. What you said, like, wow, what a rich history. Who has all this stuff? So they have this article on Dick Gregory, and I guess I'll read. So for information on the Bureau, the Springfield Division has a pending investigative matter involving Dick Gregory, which was opened for the purpose of following and reporting any pertinent remarks or activities of Dick Gregory while he's in Decatur, Illinois, for the 1973 Decatur Human Relations Annual Awards Dinner. Appropriate local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies have been advised of the pertinent information contained in the enclosed editions of the Voice of the Black Community, specifically regarding the scheduled appearance of Dick Gregory, the coordination among law enforcement officials. So that's what they're talking about here, and it goes on to give more information about, what he's going to, when this event is taking place and what Dick Gregory is going to talk about. But so they have a whole file for the Voice of the Black Community where they had Dr. Welsing's article. Then they have a whole file that this is filed under 157-225, extremist violence, Decatur. They're going to have an awards banquet.
What's the date of that again? What year?
This is December 14th, 1972. That's still like, I don't know why they would be so worried about violence at that point, but that's pretty wild. Yeah. And this is even at the J. Edgar Hoover is deceased at this point, right? This is the end of 72. Isn't he deceased at this point?
I think he died in May 72.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Then no change. I think that's important, too, because that's one of the main points that you have in Racial Matters, that we cannot just say, hey, this was just racist old Hoover's fault, and he just corrupted the Bureau, and if we could just get him out of there and we can make this place professional and we'll stop all these black bag jobs. And not at all. It continues in exactly the same manner after he's deceased, even apparently after the House Select Committee begins to investigate, like, what were you all doing? What is all this stuff? Is this illegal? It seems to still function in the same manner.
Well, right. There's Martin Luther King said history is like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And so there were reforms in the mid-'70s, but how effective were they? In other words, they might have been effective for a few years, and then old habits return. And again, if you look at what's going on right now, it is, it's as bleak right now, I think, in terms of federal surveillance as it's ever been in American history.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, if you look at what ICE is doing in terms of trying to track down immigrants, if you look at what the FBI is doing in terms of spying on I can't even remember what they called Antifa, right? Anti-fascist.
Mm-hmm.
The anti-fascist organization, which doesn't even exist. There is no Antifa. It's an idea, and the idea is anti-fascism. And it's the same idea that the Abraham Lincoln Brigade had, and the same idea my father had in World War II, right? We're anti-fascists. So you look at that kind of stuff, and the amount of surveillance that's going on right now, and the tools that governments can use to spy on people are remarkably, exponentially more varied and diverse and powerful than they were when J. Edgar Hoover was alive. And in terms of political science theory, when Hannah Arendt and others, they come up with the idea of totalitarianism to distinguish a form of government more extreme than, kings and dictators and all that. But the key idea behind totalitarianism is that there are modern methods that governments can now use to exert social control. And see, Hannah Arendt, she was writing in the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s, right? She's most noted for that New Yorker article, Eichmann in Jerusalem. But that was a long time ago. And the type of tools that the government has now for social control, propaganda, moving public opinion, vastly more powerful. And that's not even getting into things like AI, social media, and all of that. And so today, this is a real crisis point. And today you can have targeting of anybody. I mean, who just got indicted today? The former director of the FBI, James Comey. And if you want your head really to hurt, think about this. Without James Comey, there would be no Donald Trump. James Comey was the FBI director when he reopened the investigation of Hillary Clinton on the eve of the election in 2016 that virtually guaranteed she would lose and Trump would win. So Trump owes his presidency to James Comey, and yet Trump sees James Comey as his enemy. And today he was indicted, the great seashell case of 2026. He was indicted for, 8647, setting up seashells on a public beach to spell out the number 86 and the number 47. And former FBI director is being prosecuted right now, allegedly for threatening to kill Trump. I mean, what kind of universe are we in right now? It's bizarre.
Everybody
Absolutely
wants
bizarre.
to kill Trump. That's what he says. Everybody's out to get me. I'm trying to do the right things.
But 86 means, it can mean, kill, but more commonly it means get rid of something. Like a bad quart of milk, 86 that quart of milk. That's the most common usage. But regardless, it's just ridiculous. And yet here we are. We are so screwed up that even a former FBI director engaging in surveillance, engaging in wiretapping, engaging in mass surveillance of black people, even he can be indicted. It's just it's like Banana Republic stuff.
Context of White Supremacy. I got to make sure I didn't even get all my Welsing files. I had so much because they sent me, I got a batch of Welsing files, and then I had made a separate, I made the request for the Voice of the Black Community because they cross-referenced Dr. Welsing there. So I said, well, let's see what else they got in the Voice of the Black Community. So they started sending me some of those files. That's how I got the Dick Gregory and all the rest of it. But one of the other Dr. Welsing files, this is from 1975, which is, matter of fact, this is 2 months before she was fired from Howard, or they didn't renew her tenure, or however you want to say it. So this is April 11, 1975. This one also routed to the director. This one has lots of handwriting all over it, so I'd have to kind of really, maybe I can send this to you so you can look at it. You can, See if you can pick out some of it.
Yes.
And so underneath, so wait a minute. So it's got Director FBI 157-285-67. And then beneath that, it's got attention. I think this is Intelligence Division. You can correct me. INTD. What is that? All capital letters?
I'm not sure. This is, the year again is 1975?
Yes, sir. April.
Yeah, it might be. In the Hoover era, they had the Domestic Intelligence Division.
What did they do?
That might have been renamed. Well, they're the ones that, under the Assistant Director, William Sullivan, the Domestic Intelligence Division, they're the ones who went after Martin Luther King.
Wow. Wow. Okay.
But
maybe
can you tell whose file belongs to 28567?
I'll keep reading. So this. Oh, I had mentioned them before. AA.
No, just look up. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Just look up at the top. It might have to and from and subject. Is there a subject?
To Director FBI, and then from Special Agent in Charge, Washington Field Office, and then it's got another code 15754.
Yeah, but what is, you got to and from? Isn't there a subject line?
Oh yes, that was where I was going to keep reading. All African People's Revolutionary Party, AAPRP.
Yeah.
And then it's regarding the Washington Field Office Airtel, April 9, 1975. It reads, attached herewith the Bureau's information is a proposal for a Pan-African conference scheduled for July 11 to the 13th, 1975, to be held at a location yet to be selected. This was furnished by redacted, I'm going to assume informant, who has advised that the proposal did not originate with the All African People's Revolutionary Party Central Committee in Washington, D.C., but from the possible meeting sites set out and the fact that advance registration is to be sent to the CPAD in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Source speculated the conference may be held in that area. Source did not know what the initials for CPAD signify. And then it goes on to give the report. It's got Bureau, Washington Field Office. Do you know what OMS? Do you know what that is? All caps?
No. I might be able to figure it out if I saw the document, but I don't know offhand. OMS?
Mm-hmm. All caps?
No.
Okay. And then it goes on. Dr. Welsing was supposed to be a part of this conference. I have to see if this actually took place. But Dr. Welsing was supposed to be a part of this conference. This is on page 3. It reads possible workshop heads. So they were going to have history, education, and maybe have Stokely Carmichael come to present. And then under medical, it has Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, mental health and medical doctor. And then it goes on to give, apparently, their informant, like they got all of the information, like everything you would want, the budget, how much they're going to spend for food, missile gratuity, everything, travel setup, like thoroughly infiltrated, or either they got someone at the bank who could give them all of these resources, and then the people that are going to come, what the goals of it are, all that good stuff, and then who they're going to bring as well. But I just like, and again, if this is going to the intelligence division, like, why? This is another one. Like, what are they doing here that's so radical or extremist?
Right. You have to think of it this way: if there is a black organization on any level whatsoever, the FBI probably has a file on that organization. Does that mean they have a file on Dr. Welsing? Not necessarily. But any organization, they're going to have a file. Just for my own edification, while you were discussing this particular file, I just pulled up, and you mentioned Dick Gregory earlier, so I pulled up Dick Gregory's excerpts from his file, and mostly these are cross-references. And so I'm looking at one here. It's the same thing, exactly what you described. The headquarters file number 157-25073. Okay, so what is that? That's the FBI file on African Liberation Day. And so why does the FBI have a file on African Liberation Day? Because it's a group or an organization or a celebration that has to do with black people. And so, voila, the FBI has a file on it. And you mentioned Dick Gregory, so I just looked at this here, and here's what it says. Dick Gregory, black nightclub entertainer, spoke about the Watergate situation. He pointed out that there were no black people involved in it. So what is this? And by the way, that's incorrect, isn't it?
Yeah, right, correct.
Have you heard of Frank Wills, right?
I thought he wrote
Frank
a book.
Wills,
Didn't he write a book?
No. Well, actually, Alex Haley, right? The autobiography of Malcolm X, right?
Roots.
He was going to do a biography of Frank Wills, but he never got around to it. Frank Wills was a young black guy, minimum wage security guard at the Watergate building. And because of Frank Wills, the Watergate burglars got caught. And what the Watergate burglars did is they taped a door latch, they taped it open, but instead of putting the tape vertically, they wrapped it around horizontally. And so Frank Wills, making his rounds, he can see the tape sticking out, right? Taping the door open.
Mm-hmm.
So he ripped the tape off, and he called the real police, right, D.C. Metro. And they showed up, and they did a sweep, and they found the Watergate burglars in the offices of Larry O'Brien and the Democratic National Committee.
The break-ins.
By the way, we hear Larry O'Brien's name a lot right now, don't we? Isn't that what the NBA playoffs are all about? Right?
I guess so. Eventually, yes, sir.
Then he's the NBA commissioner, right? And the Larry O'Brien trophy. And we got one here in Milwaukee a few years ago. Honest.
Right. Kareem got one before.
So to go back, Dick Gregory says there are no black people involved in Watergate. Oh, yeah, that's true. There are no black crooks involved in Watergate. But without a young black man, those burglars wouldn't have been caught.
Totally lost the history.
Yep.
Just for the record, I was not laughing at Dick Gregory's joke, even though that is funny. I was laughing at the absurdity of the FBI having that in their file as important. But you did right up back to Dr. Welsing and Dick Gregory. Question one, you talked about the logo, and even I read the file where the FBI, they had coordinated to send reports from the black community newspaper to all the local police departments. Dick Gregory, he's coming to town, and this might say something incendiary or talk about Watergate. How common was it for the FBI to coordinate with local law enforcement when they're engaging in all these nefarious activities, snooping on black people?
That's pretty routine. And in terms of local law enforcement, here's something I think pretty much everybody has noticed. Here, I'll give you an example here in Milwaukee. Like No Kings, right? The giant demonstration, they've got godzillion people. And you basically, finding a policeman is like a scavenger hunt. They're just not very many around.
Really?
And these No Kings protests, mostly white people, and mostly old white people. And so, but now if you have a police shooting where a young black guy gets shot, unarmed, gets shot and killed by the police, and there's a march.
Sade Robinson.
There might be more police on horseback than there are more marches.
That's crazy. Are you fibbing? Because they had those protests here in Seattle, and I saw police. It was the same thing. You know, Seattle is super white. We had protests, and it was a lot of police, to make sure things didn't get rowdy.
But Seattle has a reputation going back to the World Trade Organization, all that stuff. They have a reputation for being really, really rowdy. But in Milwaukee, not. And my wife and I went to a No Kings protest in Chicago too, which also has a reputation for being rowdy and very few police.
Wow. It was mostly white people in Chicago?
Pardon me?
It was mostly white people in Chicago?
At this particular demonstration.
Wow.
Well, not exclusively, but I'm just saying heavily white, heavily elderly too.
Okay. And he got the
kind of understandable. I mean, if you're young and you got kids, you need every nickel and dime you got. And if you're a little older, you have more free time in your hands and sometimes more, resources that you can go and protest and do things like that.
Sure.
But in any event, yeah.
With the Chicago, once I got those files, and particularly once I saw that they were snooping on Dr. Welsing at age 19, I'll find out why once I get, or at least the context once I get them.
Send me that. Yeah, send me that one too.
I put in a request for her parents because I said I don't understand, and I still don't. I don't understand why they would be snooping on her at 19. Like what? I don't know what she could have been doing in high school that would have warranted all that attention. But I put in a request for her parents, and apparently there is information for both of her parents. Her dad was a doctor, Henry Cress,
right.
And then her mom, Ida Griffin Cress. Is it common? Well, I do want to reiterate, because you said this every time that you've spoken with us, the FBI, they snoop on black people. They snoop on black people, all of them. So we got that. But would they spy on a whole family of black people for generations? Do they do that? Have you seen that in the files?
I haven't seen that. Is anything possible? Sure, but it's not. It's possible, but not likely. It's but again, that's sort of interesting. And the most fascinating thing you told me tonight is that they have a file on her when she was a 19-year-old girl in Chicago. And that is sort of interesting. And the other thing I found fascinating, FBI might have had a file on her, a school teacher mother and her doctor father.
Her dad was a World War II veteran. Does that mean anything? He was a doctor. He was a doctor. No. He was a doctor, medic.
No, that doesn't mean anything unless, there's something there. If they did have files on the family, there's a reason. Because, again, they don't have the horses to have an individual file on millions of people. Okay? They can do community surveillance by going into cities and towns and like a barber shop in a black area and paying the barber $50 a month, to talk to them once a week, what's going on in the community. But see, that's a long way from having an actual file, on millions and millions of people. But if they did have a file on this Welsing family, that's really kind of interesting.
That's what I said. What is going? Unless I don't know enough about what.
Send me that 1954 document where they were interested in her when she was just 19.
I'm waiting eagerly, sir. Once I can get it in I thought I would have had it before, but I guess you said it was a miracle that I got them already, so maybe I should not complain.
That's actually pretty quick.
Okay.
Maybe they're afraid of you.
That is funnier than Dick Gregory, Dr. O'Reilly. You should see if you can get a one-nighter in Milwaukee or something. Go and tell them you got a few jokes.
If you don't have a sense of humor, you can't survive. Can't.
That's what they tell me. I noted one of the wild things that I did note, the FBI, that I did not, I thought it was way more serious than Dick Gregory's jokes. They were tracking how black people responded to the publication of the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, because that's the same time period.
Yeah.
They were tracking the response to that, and they were tracking the response to all the information coming out that the FBI was spying on black people. They have lots of files where they're tracking, let's see what they're thinking and how they're going to respond. That I thought was very serious, very wow, this is, white people are not ignorant about racism. You're tracking how black people respond to finding out the government has been conducting experiments on us for 40 years, and you're tracking the response. That is scientific study of black people, not ignorance.
That Tuskegee stuff is the issue. There was you had people infected with syphilis, and they were not treated. But they were not. That doesn't mean they were purposefully infected either.
Right.
In other words, that's bad enough, knowing someone is ill, and instead of treating them, you're monitoring the progression of the disease. That's like Nazi stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Almost said a bad word.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that's not to say that they were purposefully infected by the government.
Right.
What the government did was bad enough without going the extra yard and making something up.
Letting them go out and infect others.
Yeah, it's like Native Americans and the story that the U.S. government and the Army, and the British Army too, purposely infected American Indians with smallpox via infected, contaminated blankets. Well, there were certainly plans to do that, but was it ever done? Highly, highly unlikely. First of all, who would you get to hand out smallpox-infected blankets? Would you do that? I wouldn't do that. And secondly, you didn't have vaccines back then, but you had inoculation against smallpox. And the United States government was inoculating Indian tribes wherever they could against smallpox, just like George Washington had inoculation of the Revolutionary Army. It's one reason we won the American Revolutionary War. Our troops were inoculated against smallpox, the British weren't. And the government inoculated many Indian tribes. So what the government did vis-a-vis American Indians is bad enough without having to go the extra yard and make stuff up. And the Tuskegee syphilis experiments is bad enough. And knowing someone has syphilis, knowing you can cure them, and just watching them, disintegrate, and take notes on their disintegration month to month, year to year. It's horrific.
Well, after a cure to syphilis has been established, so.
Well, sure, yeah, it's penicillin. I mean, and this is, that's basically what a lot of the Nazi doctors were doing. They were monitoring people, like how long can a person survive naked in 35-degree water. So they put them in a tub with ice cubes and just monitor them until they die. Scientific experiment. Mm. That's no different than monitoring someone with syphilis until they die. It's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. The pace of death is different, but that's all.
I wanted to ask, have you, when they give you these records, and I thought that was an important point where you said sometimes where it says informant, that might be a wire, something electronic, it might be an actual person. When it is an actual person,
break-in, could be a break-in too.
Oh, that's it. That was right. That's important. When it's an actual person, and they redact the identifying information when they give you the document. If you wait, like for some of these, we're talking, it's been 50 years, some of them even longer. Have you found that you can make requests to get the names unredacted of informants to say, hey,
that's very difficult to do. I'm not sure, but I don't think you can do that. But you can ask, and if everybody's deceased, but how would you know they're deceased? Then maybe common sense, right? If the document is 80 years old and you're asking for it 80 years later, you can assume the person is dead. But I don't think you can do that. And also, a lot of the folks who are informants, very few of them are prominent people. Now, there are exceptions to that, right? Like the photographer down in Memphis, a black man who, really, really famous in Memphis, took lots of civil rights photographs, but he cooperated with the FBI and gave the FBI all sorts of information. And he was a prominent individual. His name escapes me for the moment. But most informants are not, famous people. So even if you get their name, what are you going to do? Hire a private detective to find out who they are? Now, other people, like you mentioned earlier, right at the top, someone named Lively.
Walter Lively, yes, sir.
Yeah, like someone like that. The odds are you could just simply Google him.
Ernest Withers.
Most FBI informants are just obscure people.
Ernest Withers is the photographer you were referencing.
Yeah, that's the guy. Yeah. And there's a book written by a journalist, University of Memphis School of Journalism. Yeah, but again, that's the exception. Now, are there some examples of spectacular FBI informants? Sure, Ronald Reagan. That's the classic example. He had a code designation too. I can't remember his code. Ronald Reagan was, I don't know, something, if I can remember. He was T10.
Okay. I didn't know that. Oh.
So, but again, most informants are obscure. A few of them are real high profile. Whether the guy in Memphis or Ronald Reagan. But again, finding out their identities is very, very difficult. Now, remember, the FBI makes mistakes too, and sometimes they forget or make a clerical error and don't black out the name.
Okay.
And that happens sometimes.
Be on the lookout for that. I forgot one of the more important nuggets in all of that. Those approximately 50 pages or so that I'm waiting to receive where they were spying on Dr. Welsing at 19, I totally forgot one of the juiciest nuggets of that was that they acknowledged to snooping on her in 1954, which, I don't know, it's no coincidences. That is the year of Brown v. Board of Education, so
correct.
I don't know. Maybe related.
Yeah, and her mother.
A teacher, right. That
teacher unions, they get involved in all of that stuff.
Okay. All right. Anyway, so 19, they're snooping on her and such, but the other component of that was they said out of those approximately 50 pages, they said that 6 of them they did not want to release, and the reason given was informants. I said, whoa, why would you have informants? And it was like plural, so I guess it could be multiple, but why would you have informants for a 19-year-old? Like, what? I just need to see what is going on? What is happening other than the Brown v. Board of Education? But I mean, whoa, what is going on here?
Yeah, it's tough. It's hard, again, to blast out the identity of informants as a general rule. In black history, probably the most famous informant would be William O'Neill.
Mm-hmm. How did he get identified by name? Did he voluntarily?
Well, he talked to Henry Hampton, the Eyes on the Prize guy.
Mm-hmm. I mean, did they get his information? Did he volunteer to talk to them?
I believe so. I'm not real sure about that. But O'Neill started talking. His identity was first exposed in 1973, and then he began talking. He could have just kept his mouth shut and let it blow over, but he started giving interviews. He gave an interview to the Chicago Tribune. He gave an interview to Henry Hampton, the Eyes on the Prize producer. And he actually convinced Henry Hampton that he was misunderstood and that he was really the good guy. He wasn't the bad guy. But then Henry Hampton and the Eyes on the Prize people did some additional research. And when they ran the program about the killing of Fred Hampton, William O'Neill came off as the bad guy. And shortly thereafter, he threw himself off a highway, interstate overpass, I think on the Dan Ryan, into traffic and killed himself. Got run over.
Yeah, that is
suicide.
Whole thing is a tragedy. What I point out, I didn't learn until years.
Let me tell you this: the number of informants that the FBI had, especially in Black America, it was like off the charts, and it was not as high a percentage as the informants the FBI had in the Communist Party, but it was still a very high percentage. And by the way, in the Communist Party, the FBI tried to recruit almost exclusively Black men and women to be informants in the Communist Party.
Why?
Well, because if you're a Black man in the Communist Party, a Black woman in the Communist Party, and you're an FBI informant, and someone accuses you of being an FBI informant, then the person accusing you themselves are accused of racism. So it's like a buffer. It's like a buffer zone. Not as good as Israel's buffer zones, but it's like a buffer zone nonetheless. So the FBI really, really wanted to recruit Black people within the Communist Party as informants.
They hire lots of They hire lots of Black thinks. Think everywhere, just go and think and snitch and peep and gee whiz.
Well, I mean that if you watch procedurals, police procedurals on TV, right?
Mm.
You know, they all have confidential informants, right? Registered, or So the police, right? Local, state police have informants. Federal police have informants. The CIA, they don't call them informants; they call them assets, right? So I mean, it's just par for the course. When I did the Racial Matters book, what I found out most interesting is that the FBI would just, for a few bucks a week or a few bucks a month, Black barbershops, Black bookstores, quickback stores, grocery stores, which unfortunately don't exist in a lot of Black neighborhoods anymore, and the FBI would recruit the owners as informants. Now, they wouldn't be full-scale informants. What the Bureau called them were ghetto informants, and that's like the lowest rung of FBI informant. And so they would just, tell their FBI handlers, what's going on in the neighborhood this week, that type of stuff. And they'd be paid. It wouldn't be paid much, but they would be paid. And so you have that type of informant that the FBI was running, and then you would have the other type symbolized by William O'Neill, the more high-level one, or back in the day, Ronald Reagan, right? When the issue was communists in Hollywood.
But I see we had they had a question they wanted to ask Dr. O'Reilly. I just wanted to say really quick with William O'Neill, just for context, it really changed my opinion about all of that when I did not grasp. I knew Fred Hampton was super. You're talking about 19 in Chicago. I knew Fred Hampton, 19, 20-year-old in Chicago organizing.
He's a young guy, yeah.
I did not know that William O'Neill was also very young when he got recruited for all of this. That drastically altered my thought process about all of this. We're talking about a 19, 18-year-old Black male, and the FBI coming to pressure you like, oh, my God. Like, that's the same thing, a child. Like, we can come, you can go to jail, or we can do whatever we want to. Like, I do not think of William O'Neill as a bad dude or what have you at all. I think of him as a manipulated child who was totally taken advantage of for all their purposes.
Yeah, that's the Dalton Trumbo argument. only victims, and Trumbo made that argument in regard to the McCarthy era blacklists. In other words, you had people who named names. They named their friends as communists, and their friends lost their jobs. But Dalton Trumbo said, well, the people who lost their jobs are victims, but the people who name names, they're also victims. And that's one way of looking at it. I don't know how much sympathy you're going to get for looking at William O'Neill as a victim.
I'm just trying to look at things logically. I mean, if I do think the white people that came to talk to him, I know that they were not 19. If we're talking people in the age range of a white man that's in his 40s, 30s, and you're coming to talk to a black male that's 18, 19 years old with no education, I do not think that is reasonable. Or what did they say? No. Without coercion? That seems like a lot of coercion.
And they come in pairs, too.
Oh, my God.
It's not just one FBI agent who shows up.
With a gun, probably.
Now here's another thing. You mentioned the age of Fred Hampton, William O'Neill. That's what the Panthers did. They basically tried to recruit young guys, and to a degree, too, young women, and teenagers. And one reason for that, they wanted to keep them out of the gangs. Like in Chicago, the big gang back in Fred Hampton's day was the Blackstone Rangers. And Jeff Fort, who has a Muslim name now, and he's in a supermax prison. But that's what the Bureau was, what the Black Panther Party was into, getting young people away from nihilistic violence, drugs, and all that stuff into productive activities. And other groups, like the Panthers, were revolutionary political nationalists. But other black groups were cultural nationalists, like Ron Everett, Moana Karinga. You've heard of him, right?
Yes, sir. U.S. slaves.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, us. And they did the same thing. They were recruiting gang kids, too, young kids, to get them away from nihilistic violence. And sometimes, like especially in California, in San Diego, Los Angeles, the Panthers and Karinga's group were recruiting the same kids, and that led to conflict and some shootings too, and some deaths.
FBI involvement there too. Bunchy Carter, Mark Clark.
Yeah, sure. The FBI did not shoot anybody out in California, but they egged on this violence between two black groups, and some of the young kids in Karinga's group, lost their heads, and they killed 3 or 4 Panthers. And when a body dropped, the FBI would taunt the Panthers. You got to get your revenge, that type of thing, which is pretty disgraceful.
Facts. Bunchy Carter, Mark Clark just talked about them. UCLA as well. Let's see. Retired firefighter. Did you have a question you wanted for Dr. O'Reilly while we have him with us? Retired firefighter in Florida.
Yes, sir. Greetings, Mr. O'Neill and everybody.
O'Reilly.
Oh, I'm sorry, O'Reilly.
That's okay.
Because part of my question was going to be about the person that was hired by the FBI to spy on the Black Panther Party. Didn't they? He was a felon, and they threatened him with jail time, and to pass away the jail time that he probably would have gotten, that he spied for them.
I'm not real sure of that, but that would be generally standard operating procedure. If my memory serves me, I think the FBI threatened O'Neill with prison for auto theft, but I'm not real sure of that. I mean, I'm trying to search my memory banks here. But whether that is exactly right or not, that's what the FBI would do. That's what local police would do. That's leverage. And, no one wants to be an informant, right? And in the Bible, who's one of the most famous characters in the Bible, right? Judas, 30 pieces of silver.
Right.
No one really wants to be an informant. So pretty much everyone is coerced, and they could be coerced through intimidation, right? Full-grown FBI agents intimidating a 16-year-old black kid, or it can be through threatening somebody with prison. And it can be tempting. You get to stay out of prison, and we'll also pay you. And so you get a salary, and you don't go to jail. but you have to betray your friends, and that wears on somebody's soul, or it should wear on everybody's soul.
Yeah. Also, I've always been interested in the study of the not just JFK, but the Kennedy's period, starting with Joe Kennedy, and I think he played a principal part of how crafty they were. You know, especially with all of his sons, he had an ambition for all of his sons to be president, from my understanding. When JFK became president, he also sent, he didn't call them troops, he said he sent advisors to Vietnam to kill and teach the made-up government that was controlled by white people powerful white people in the United States, and I think France. Am I making sense to this? That he played, in other words, the whole idea about him being an ally in racism is false, and that's one of the examples that makes him in that position to be false because of what he did.
Kennedy on the color line was reluctant. But again, as I said earlier, he did put up the Civil Rights Bill of 1963, and that became the Civil Rights Act of 1964. In terms of Vietnam, we don't know what Kennedy would have done because of the assassination. But yeah, he took a major step toward the Vietnam War by sending in military advisors. And it was just a tragic thing. And if he hadn't been assassinated, would we have avoided, 500,000 ground troops in Vietnam? I don't know. Nobody knows that. So his legacy is profoundly mixed. And he was, for the civil rights movement, when Kennedy was president, he was incredibly frustrating because he would not do what the movement asked. But at the end, he did. And so at least, he came around at the end. But again, it took him 1,000 days, and by the time he came around, he was no longer around, right? He was assassinated.
Last but not least, I was just going to say, last but not least, what about during the brief time that he was in office, a lot of tragic events took place under his guard. The murder of Medgar Evers, 5 children being murdered in their church. There were some other things that I can bring up during that time where he was not very aggressive as it should have been with those incidents to either be prevented or prosecuted to the people who caused the offenses. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's the, and by the way, the FBI had the same issue that Kennedy did. If the FBI is aggressive in enforcing federal civil rights law, they alienate white Southerners. If they're passive in enforcing federal civil rights law, they alienate the civil rights movement and liberal Northerners. And so that's an issue. Now with Medgar Evers, that type of act, there's nothing the government could have done there. Here you have Byron D. Beckwith with a long gun, lying in wait and shooting a man getting out of his car in his own driveway. We have a gun culture in this country, and acts of violence like that, how do you stop them without getting rid of guns? And you certainly don't stop them by building giant ballrooms attached to the White House. The other example you gave is Dynamite Bob Chambliss and the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham. And they killed four little black girls. And one of those little black girls was like the best childhood friend of Angela Davis.
Right.
Yeah, that type of stuff, yes, the government could have done a much better job. And by the way, after that, then the FBI did launch a counterintelligence program against the Ku Klux Klan. But at that, right before that 16th Street church bombing, you had the Children's March in Birmingham, Alabama. And Martin Luther King, it's called the Children's March because Martin Luther King had a lot of children marching, knowing that it makes better television and better newspaper photographs if you have police dogs and fire hoses aimed at young people. And it's hard to sit in your living room and root for the police when they're attacking children. And so really, that's what made the Civil Rights Movement just a major, major force in American politics, the Children's March in Birmingham. And then, of course, right after that, you have the March on Washington, the I Have a Dream speech, and then, boom, the BAP bomb, 16th Street Baptist Church, and Kennedy puts up his Civil Rights Bill, which becomes the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Could the government have done more? Yeah, the government could have done a lot more. And the big gripe the civil rights people had was Kennedy thought the civil rights movement was too aggressive with things like sit-ins and freedom rides. He thought that was antagonizing white Southerners. And so the Kennedy administration, President Bobby Kennedy, tried to convince the civil rights movement to back off direct confrontations like sit-ins and freedom rides and go instead for voter registration. Have civil rights activists try to register voters in the South. And it didn't work out like that. Voter registration, white Southerners, racists, the Ku Klux Klan, sheriffs, they saw voter registration as just as provocative as freedom rides and sit-ins. And so there was incredible violence aimed at voter registration workers. And there were murders, whippings, dismemberments, all sorts of really, really bad stuff. And the civil rights people were basically begging the federal government for protection. And the federal government said, no, we can't do that. It's a states' rights issue. And the FBI said, no, we can't do that. And so you would have FBI agents just standing around while civil rights workers were, beat up and sometimes killed. And here's just an interesting side point. A lot of civil rights workers down south at the time wore overalls. And most people think, well, that's so they could identify with the croppers and the plantation cotton pickers and all that. But no, they wore overalls because it's bad enough to get beat up, but it's even worse to get beat up while you're naked. And at least if you're wearing overalls, you might get beat up, but at least you'll have your clothes on.
And we can't forget that not only the president, his brother was the chief law enforcement officer.
Sure.
At the time.
Yeah, and they were indifferent.
Go ahead.
John and Bobby Kennedy, they were indifferent toward the civil rights movement. Absolutely true. But what I'm saying is once you have the Children's March in Birmingham, once you have the March on Washington, once you have the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing, the political calculus changed, and they're no longer indifferent. They put up the Civil Rights Bill.
I do want to say for the record, the March on Washington, much obliged retired firefighter in Florida. The Kennedys, President Kennedy, Attorney General Bobby Kennedy, the Kennedys' conduct during the March on Washington is anything but indifference, per Minister Malcolm X, per the great John Lewis, and many others. And even some of your research, their conduct was not indifferent. That right there I would point to as they did not come around. they are still operating like white people who practice racism, white supremacy.
No,
And we're going to make sure that this march does not get out of control. In
right.
fact,
as
Minister Malcolm X said, they took over the march, totally changed it from what its original purpose was. He talked about that in great detail. Icarus, the chapter in his autobiography. Anywho,
yeah, he called it
the farce.
Right. But that's not my point. My point is the Kennedy administration was indifferent toward the movement. When the movement forced the Kennedy administration to respond, yes, their response was horrific at first. But if you, again, those three things, the Children's March, the March on Washington, and the Birmingham bombing, those three things forced the Kennedy administration to do the right thing.
Again, I'm just saying for the record, they did not do the correct thing at the March on Washington. That is not an illustration. Silencing John Lewis, that is not an illustration of doing the correct thing. And Minister Malcolm X, he called it the farce. That certainly does not suggest that they did the correct thing at all.
No, that's not what I said. What I said is they do the correct thing after, not during.
Well, he died in November, so I mean...
Right, but the Civil Rights Bill comes after the March on Washington. See, what the movement was doing was trying to force the Kennedy administration to do the right thing. And what the Kennedy administration was doing was hoping they could either stifle the civil rights movement, but that wasn't their priority. Their priority was to wait it out. The Kennedy administration compared the civil rights movement to a snowstorm, where every couple hours you look out the window and you say, when's it going to end? Okay. But to the civil rights movement's credit, the civil rights movement forced the Kennedy administration to act. And we can say whatever we want, but we do get the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is the civil rights bill that Kennedy put up.
Okay. Well, we can pause right because I didn't. This was sideburnered. I didn't even get to all my things about COINTELPRO. I just want to state for the record, the goal was not obtain civil rights bill. That wasn't even the goal of the March on Washington. That was all Kennedy, and that didn't replace white supremacy with justice. So we have a different thought process about that entirely.
Yeah, I don't.
I do want to make sure I get in the point about file codes being redacted entirely. Have you seen that where you get a report where the entire code has been redacted?
No, I don't know what's up with that. Again, if you have these kind of documents, that's another one I'd like you to send me.
Okay,
that sounds pretty strange. You would redact the subject, like John Smith, or the organization, right, the Black Student Union. But why redact the file code unless there's a contextual issue in that I'm not sure. I can't even make that argument. But I'd like to see that document if you could send me that.
Okay. I have one that I'm looking at here just for illustration. This is the voice of the black community where they're talking about Dr. King and other issues that are just in the newspaper. So this one from April 5, that's so funny. For this one, they have the code. It is 1157, of course, 1094, but the name for the file is redacted. Now, there's a different one where all of that information is redacted, but it's right under, it has the code for the voice of the black community, and it has the code for the Bureau, 157-12183. I think I get a ratio different one from that file. And then it has enclosure 25, and then in parentheses RM. But at the very bottom, it's got that code 1157-1094, and then it's redacted, whatever the file name is for that code.
Yeah, that I have no idea, but I'd like to look at that.
Okay.
That would have to be puzzled out.
Okay. I'm going to see if I can request if they can unredact the file. I mean, even if it's a person at this point, like this is like over 50 years, like what in the, what would be the pressing, security threat at this point? Like, I'm going to ask to see if I can get that unredacted. We had a listener who wrote a question in. They said, Dr. O'Reilly, where do you gather? What do you do in order to gather the data that you get? And is there any specific way that you verify the information that you get?
Yeah, generally you got to verify it with more than one source. Now, you can sometimes use information that is not accurate because the information tells you about the FBI. And so that what the information the FBI is collecting on Martin Luther King or whoever might be inaccurate, but that information it doesn't tell you much about Martin Luther King because it's inaccurate, but it tells you a lot about the FBI. And so, you see, when you do history, your sources can sometimes go both ways. Like as a teacher, sometimes I would run into a student and they'd write a term paper saying, Dwight Eisenhower and Franklin Roosevelt were communist agents. And I'd say, well, where are your sources? And they'd have a list of 10 sources. But each source, the publisher, was the John Birch Society. All right. But as a historian, here's the thing. The John Birch Society is not a good source for understanding Franklin Roosevelt or Dwight Eisenhower or modern American politics. But the John Birch Society is a really good source for understanding American conservatism. See how that works?
For sure.
Your sources, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish with your sources. Now, in terms of FBI stuff, I was pretty much on the ground floor. And I was one of the first people to really start doing, not the first, but one of the first to do heavy-duty research in FBI files. And so right off the bat, you get Freedom of Information Act request. But another thing to do is to locate, to find who is suing the FBI and get access to their files. Okay. And then a third thing to do is to track down agents, retired, now current FBI agents, they're not going to talk to you. But you can talk to retired FBI agents. They won't all talk to you, but some of them will. And so interviewing FBI agents, getting FBI files, and then getting FBI material released in discovery in lawsuits against the FBI. Those are the main sources. And then, of course, you have memoirs. Some of the FBI guys, they write memoirs about their years in the Bureau. And so that's just the nuts and bolts of it. And then there's a final source. For example, Walter White and Roy Wilkins. In the era that I did most of my research, they were two big NAACP guys. And in both cases, they cooperated with the FBI. And so if you look at their papers, you can find material regarding the FBI. And the current project I'm working on, a biography of this guy, New Deal guy called Gardner Jackson. And back in the 30s, the FBI was union busting. And so J. Edgar Hoover fired about a dozen fingerprint clerks because they were trying to organize a union of FBI clerks. And so that's union busting. And so the guy I'm working on, he organized picketing of the FBI building. And so I wrote, 3 books on the FBI. I never knew that. But I find that out because I'm researching Gardner Jackson, and I find out about he organized picketing of the FBI in his papers, which are at the Roosevelt Library in Hyde Park, New York. And so when you start researching, you have, as an historian, you have one source, and that leads you to 2 sources, and 2 sources lead you to 4 sources. And it's like geometric progression, and pretty soon you have a 40-page bibliography.
Fascinating, fascinating. Hopefully that got the listener's question. I started with some of these documents, like you said, looking at the handwriting and different initials. I was seeing like the Springfield office, they had initials on it, and I said, oh, I was trying to dig around and I think this is Agent Joseph Baker, because that name matched up for Springfield, and these initials seem to be on a lot of documents. Like, maybe we can go and request their personnel records or whatever else. But that's, if you can find exact names of the agents, if they're still alive and retired.
Well, most of these guys from Dr. Wesling's era would be retired or dead, because that's a while ago. If my advice to you is, I wouldn't look at the little stuff so much and try to get major files. Is there an actual headquarters file on Dr. Wesling? Yes or no? Try to find that out. And any particular group, because you've mentioned about 5 or 6 groups, is there a major headquarters file on any of these groups? But once you get into the too much into the weeds and in the teeny tiny Freedom of Information Act requests, they're going to dismiss you as a crank, and they're going to put you at the. Right now, they're treating you like a star, and they're getting right on your stuff. But if you overwhelm them with itty bitty matters, I would just be careful of that. It's better to get an entire file than get snippets of 100 different files. But regardless, it's all good. I mean, even like Dick Gregory's file, you can get that online, or at least, cross references to Dick Gregory. And it's fascinating because, every time you turn a page, you see an FBI file in a different black group. And from what you're telling me about Dr. Wesling's file, it's pretty much the same thing, right? Every couple pages, the FBI is spying on a different black group.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow.
And some of the big groups, of course, would be the Panthers, right? SNCC, the NAACP, CORE, Black Student Unions, Karenga's group, and then a lot of the other groups are just, really local and often, really obscure. It's just like today, if you go to like a protest today, often at a protest today, against Trump, against ICE, whatever, on the periphery of the protests where they have the speakers, there'll be tables set up, right, for all sorts of protest groups. And so, neither you nor I bet, have heard of 99% of them. Right. Because they're teeny tiny and obscure. And it was the same way back in the J. Edgar Hoover era, the Clarence Kelly era, Dr. Wesling's era. There's just so many of these groups, and what's remarkable is the FBI, no matter how teeny tiny, they seem to be interested in all of them.
Omnipotent, dare I say? But you got to distinguish. So, I mean, what's the number? I don't know, but let's make up a number. Say there are 2,500 black groups in the United States. Okay, well, there's a lot more than 2,500 black people in the United States, right? So it's a lot easier to spy on 2,500 groups than 25 million people. For sure.
So the Bureau is they're more selective in opening files on individuals than they are in opening files on groups.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
How common was it? I was going to ask real quick, how common was it for the local police? They're like special branches in places like D.C. or New York. How common was it for the local police to keep raw intelligence notes, field notes or whatever it is on their subjects, targets, while the FBI only kept the summaries of the reports?
Well, that's the whole Red Squad issue. And you have police departments across the country, operating, Red Squads.
Right.
Political surveillance. And the massive lawsuits regarding Red Squads in Chicago, for example. And sometimes those would leak out into lawsuits against the state's attorneys, cops who are really Chicago police, who killed Fred Hampton. or it would leak out into things like the John Berge investigations. And Pat Comey was the prosecutor there. He's the same guy who went after Dick Cheney and Scooter Libby. And have you heard of John Berge?
We have just been the electric prods on the testicles. We've just been unfortunately talking about him a lot, sir.
Yeah, of course, that's insulting you.
Not at all, not at all.
But again, all that leaks out of these Red Squad suits that come out of the 60s and 70s. And again, pretty much every city had them. And in some states, at different points in American history, it was not just the police that would have Red Squads. Corporations would have them too. Ford Motor Company, U.S. Steel, and on and on. And then you would have citizens' alliances, and then local police, state police, and so it would be like, and sometimes the National Guard too, and occasionally the U.S. Army. And it was just like a massive groups of really powerful entities engaging in surveillance, and the surveillance mostly began against the labor movement in the beginning, and some of the anarchists and socialist and communist groups were mostly focused on organized labor, and then eventually what becomes a big focus: civil rights movement in Black America. But again, and sometimes we forget how violent it was back in the day, where you would have protests and you would have, dozens of people shot in the back and killed during protests, labor organizers. I mean, my wife's father, he was really old when she was born, but he worked at Ford at the River Rouge plant downriver Detroit when they brought the union in, and he brought his bologna sandwiches, a pistol, and steel knuckles to work with him every day because he was a union guy. You imagine that? I mean, you bring a pistol and steel knuckles and bologna sandwiches when you come to your podcast. I don't bring that when I go to teach. See, that's how it was. Now, is that saying it was worse back then than it is today? No, I think it's worse today. But we sometimes forget how rough it was for union people, for African Americans, for Native Americans, for Hispanic Americans, for women, gays, the whole 9 yards. And right now, where are we? The only group in America right now, according to the people who hold power, whose civil rights are under threat, are white males.
I think white women are not doing too tough, Dr. O'Reilly. Hillary Clinton has a lot of power, I think. I think white women are doing okay right now, Dr. O'Reilly. Like Hillary Clinton.
But that's not. Yeah, but that's not my point. If you look at the way we are right now, it's white men who are under assault. If you look at the Trump administration's policies, and that's the way they look at it.
Right.
And that's just absolutely bonkers, but here we are.
You're the victim, Dr. O'Reilly. That's what Elon say. You're the victim. The white man can't get a break.
Right, but you know how these guys think? Now, I'm not a billionaire, and I bet a nickel you're not a billionaire.
Just a few coins short.
That's a pretty safe bet, right? And I bet none of your listeners are billionaires. So, I mean, how many billionaires are out there? 800, 1,000? So, who is the true minority?
Indeed.
Whose rights need to be protected? Yeah, the billionaire. They're the true minority. For every one billionaire, there are like 40 million people who are not billionaires. So it's the billionaire whose rights need to be protected. That's how these guys think. And when I see these guys, I mean Supreme Court justices. I mean Trump, the Republican Party.
Elon Musk, we were
Rich
talking
people.
about him.
Most people are not rich, so who's the true minority? It's not blacks, it's not women, it's rich people. That's how they think.
Are you, Dr. O'Reilly, do you have any plans to update Racial Matters? Because it seems like you've gathered a lot more information since you originally published.
I'm doing other stuff now. I've got a book about violence, about milk, of all things. It's environmental violence, union violence, organized crime violence. And then I'm doing a biography, as I said, of this New Deal guy. So I don't know that I'm going to update it. And I don't know that I'm 74 now. I don't know if I have another book in me after these two. But we'll see. I've had some feelers. I've had some, contact with, Hollywood people about buying rights to Racial Matters. But none of that ever came through. But it did get in paperback, and it's still selling. So that
should be.
I'm happy with that.
Should be. Dr. Welsing, she said, hey, nab that copy, Racial Matters, the FBI's secret file on Black America from 1960 to 1972. Again, all of the files that I've been talking about today are dated after 1972 for context, but reading that book and having him as a guest on the program now 4 times, that is exactly why. Now, it was a little late. I should have hopped on this right after she passed, but that is a big part of what inspired me. Hey, you should be like Dr. O'Reilly and make those FOIA requests, see if you can get these files, and ta-da.
And you're going to send me those documents, right?
Will do.
1954.
Well, I don't have those at the moment. I don't have those yet. You'll have to be patient with me.
Yeah, because that one is really, really interesting. And
that's what I said.
Anything regarding Howard University. Because if the FBI was involved in a tenure decision at Howard, that's a major news story.
That's what I said. That's what I said. That's that's what I said. Uncle Dokles, I have learned a ton. Now, see, Dr. O'Reilly, he has lots of jokes. He said, oh, man, who wants to chat about all this for like 30 minutes? I said, oh, man, everybody would want to chat about COINTELPRO like that. That's why your book is still selling. Like, this is super important. Like, Jesus Christ. Even if they didn't.
Did you know Kennedy's civil rights guy, Harris Wolford, he was a white guy, but he went to Howard.
Oh, they met white people. I know they have a lot of whites. Well, not a lot, but I do know white students go there.
Yeah. And then you know what Howard's nickname is, right? The Black Harvard.
Fascinating. I don't know. We'll have to let me get all these files on Dr. Welsing, and then we'll see if they can keep that name. But yeah, we'll see if they keep that after everything pans out. But I have learned a ton. I said need to get someone who I knew would have some expertise to kind of go through and pick all this out here. The author of
And maybe we will not arm wrestle over John Kennedy too much in the future either.
For sure. He pops up, important figure might pop up. It's his time period. I'm with Minister Malcolm X on that one. The fox can be dangerous more so than the wolf. Much obliged.
Okay.
You were going to say? Go ahead. You can get it in before we depart.
Okay, my grandmother, on my mother's side, she was a cook, and she worked in factories during World War II, and then went back to being a cook. And when Joe and Rose Kennedy, they're in Boston, of course, but they had an apartment in New York, and they'd have dinner parties. My grandmother would cook for them. And then after Joe died, my grandmother she would go down to Florida with the other Annies and Mays and drink rye whiskey and smoke cigarettes and play cards with Rose Kennedy. So maybe I'm a little partial to Kennedy, a little biased. Yeah. And we actually, my wife actually has Rose Kennedy's soda bread recipe.
What in the
Yeah. All right.
Thank you for the reveal, Dr. O'Reilly. You are a gentleman and a scholar, sir. I will drop you an email. We will chat it up down the road, sir.
All right.
Take good care. Enjoy your evening. Oh, for sure.
It
Thank you.
fun.
Thank you. Thank
All right,
you.
Bye-bye.
Take care, sir.
Yep.
Wowzers. Context of White Supremacy. 4 times. Hopefully, Dr. Wells will say, hey, Gus T, you are authorized to say whatever you like about white supremacy, racism, VGQ. VGQ. You have done exactly what is said on page 1 of the ISIS papers. Dare I say, above and beyond the call of duty, because I read it multiple times. And his other works, Nixon's Piano, is also all about racism. Minstrel, that's what his title is about, is a minstrel show. It's about a minstrel show and racism, but a minstrel show. I didn't just read Racial Matters. I read it multiple times. I read other books that he wrote and interviewed the author repeatedly, and then interviewed him about the FBI files on Dr. Welsing. Above and beyond the call of duty. I have to say it now before I forget. Boy, when he said, who is the real minority? Welsing moment. I was not thinking billionaires. I was thinking white people. And you see the overlap with the billionaire, but you don't even have to be a billionaire. Being classified as white, you are the minority. And I said that's so beautiful and full circle, because that's where we started the Cress theory of color confrontation. Why are the people classified as white behaving as they do? Trump, Elon Musk, who is a South African, why are they behaving like this? Because they are the minorities in terms of population on the planet. And that's why Dr. Welsing has FBI files. Probably does have a whole folder. Probably, again, even if she doesn't, how in the world is she cross-referenced, filed at 19? Come on. Come on. Any hoodles, we will take a quick break. I'm so glad we have talked one. Signal from the Creator. Has Gus T been talking about John Burge for about the last 14 days every day? Did Gus T just write about John Burge in detail? I said Michelle Alexander, oh lion, Michelle Alexander with one white parent. I said all the omissions. You wrote this tacky book, 4th worst I've ever read, and I knew it was going to be awful, and you wrote this whole book about prison abuse, and you didn't include John Burge. What is wrong with you? You see, I ain't mean to insult your intelligence, Gus T. I'm not that intelligent, so you have no problem. But I know who John Burge is. If I was going to talk about Chicago and police and racism, I know John Burge better be mentioned. Really, if I'm going to talk about Chicago at all, they said if you go through Chicago public school, you better know who John Burge is. Michelle Alexander, born in Illinois. You going to give us a whole book? John Burge ain't in there. And that's again, I pause. I'm looking at y'all who read this book and said this book is tremendous. You read this book and you don't know who John Burge is. I am impugning your intelligence about racism. You ain't been on your job. Hey, that's what I've been saying the whole time we've been reading this book. We are Team Limp Noodle. Gus T included. I just said, hey, Dr. O'Reilly, you've been insulting my intelligence. I'm on Team Limp Noodle. I'm trying to get off of it. But that's us, unfortunately, victims. And Dr. Fuller, excuse me, Mr. Fuller, he said that through and through. He said it repeatedly in writing. He put it in writing. We are pitiful. That's us. Take a quick commercial break, and then we shall be back. But man, ain't Gus T been talking about John Burge like, but I couldn't even believe it. Like, is he bringing up the signal? And that's kind of a twofer, because that's on your grind, getting those FBI files, which brought us here today, and talking about John Burge putting electric cattle prods on black males' testicles. That's both Dr. Welsing, because ain't that what she talked about? And from Chicago, ain't that what she talked about? Ain't that what she said this is all about? I got to attack. We're a global minority. What is the threat? Them black balls. Put that on Mike Jordan. Chicago. We will take our commercial break. Be right back. Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, Context of White Supremacy. That's the way I'm saying it for the rest of the book club. And even, do you know how much it came down in terms of signals from the creator? I have been saying for all of April. He said, you don't even know what it's like to go to work with your brass knuckles and bologna sandwich and a pistol. Now, the pistol and the bologna sandwich, I don't do no ultra-processed food, so no, I ain't going to know nothing about going to no podcast with a bologna sandwich. That ain't going to happen. The pistol, on the phone, it's not really anybody around to shoot. I'll mute you all if you get on my nerves. The brass knuckles, I've been saying that all this month. That part, I do know something about that. I've been saying every time we line up to talk about Michelle Alexander's new Jim Crow, I do know what it's like to put them brass knuckles on. Oh, my Lord. And I said that. I said it's brass knuckles for this book. It's brass knuckles for the people who read this book, even Cal's listeners, and said, wow, this is amazing. Woo! We are Team Limp Noodle. Commercial break. We will be right back. Context of White Supremacy.
I believe that melanin has something to do with being able to get in tune with cosmic order if you want to use your melanin. It has something to do. That's why all the prophets, there's no such thing as a white prophet. All the prophets had pigmentation. I think that that has something to do with being able to tune in. What is the cosmic law? Finding out what it is that we are supposed to do. Finding out what we are supposed to do to be the highest expression of that which we were created to be. We have to find that. And that's the homework of everybody. See, we can't go home and say, I don't have any homework. We all have homework. The homework of self-development. The homework of learning how to be soldiers for justice and self-respect in the presence of evil. I began to sound like church. But church and politics and the correct thing and everything has to do with trying to get in line with what it's supposed to be. I mean, this is a glorious universe. And it's a glorious planet. You just look outside at nature. There are some people, however, who are disturbed. And they can't see that that's beauty enough. And they want to start jugging with genes. And they won't be satisfied until they try to become the God force itself. We cannot follow in that direction. Somehow we have got to tune into what do we think. With our black selves, what do we think we are supposed to be doing here? See, now we've had a lot of years of conditioning. The slave, yours is not to reason why, yours is but to do or die. And for some people, for them to think their own thoughts, that ain't right. Dr. Welsing, are there any authorities who agree with you? Can't use what you say until the authorities say it is okay, and the authorities fired me. But somehow we have got to pursue. We have got to, no one is going to come along and show us out of our situation. Any place on this planet. We are going to have to find that ourselves. We're going to have to find it ourselves. And I think that these exercises that I was going to talk about a few minutes ago, that these exercises can probably help us, because see, it's not, joining a group is not going to answer it. A group is only as strong as its weakest link. And so if everybody has the homework of making themselves strong, don't worry about what somebody else is doing.
Facts. Facts. Even, she said the group is only as strong as the weakest link. Hey, Mr. Fuller talked about that four-wallism. Even at the Welsing Institute, the weakest link might be on the FBI payroll. Maybe retract. Especially at the Welsing Institute, the weakest link is probably on the FBI payroll. Dr. Welsing had informants around her since she was 19. Unless you think they thought she was less dangerous at 70 than she was at 19. Context of White Supremacy. That's it. I did feel some type of way, like, dang, I'm going to get a white man to talk about the FBI files on Dr. Welsing. Isn't there a black person to talk about all this? Carl Evans, he came to mind. He wrote The Assassination of Malcolm X, which is a phenomenal book. We should have probably read that on the book club already, but it is phenomenal. That should also be mandatory reading. It just gives so much. The great Patrice Lumumba's assassination is in that book, but it is amazing. In fact, he is on the team of filmmakers who made I think it's on Netflix, wherever that documentary is, but I think it is on Netflix, about the assassination of Malcolm X, and how the FBI, COINTELPRO, their involvement, even the local New York Police Department's squad, Red Squad, as we were talking about, where they had spies. Eugene's name is missing. Come to me. Is it Eugene Robinson? I think it is. But he was spying on Minister Malcolm X. We mentioned the photographer Ernest C. Withers, but the weakest link is probably going to be on the FBI payroll. But we discussed all of that, but Carl Evans discusses all of this in his book, The Assassination of the Judas Factor. That's it. He talked about 30 pieces of silver, but that's what it's called, The Judas Factor, The Assassination of Malcolm X, which is just absolutely amazing. One of the best books that I've ever read, and he was indeed involved with the making of that documentary film project. But like, other than Mr. Evans, I'm not really aware of too many black people that like COINTELPRO is a subject matter of interest for them. I know there are other people who study all of this, and I'm sure there are black people that study all this who are experts, maybe even more informed than Dr. O'Reilly, who I just have never heard of. Regular, citizen, whatever. That I'm sure is the case. I'm just saying I'm not. All of the people that I'm aware of, like I could have got John Potash, right? He's been a guest on our program, written about COINTELPRO and all that. In fact, maybe I should. But all of the people that I know, Jeffrey Haas, Chicago connection, right? We're talking about Fred Hampton, white. John Potash, white. Dr. Kenneth O'Reilly, white. If you all know some people classified as black who COINTELPRO is like a subject, they are a subject area expert with regards to COINTELPRO, please inform. We will chat it up, but I do not, or at least it's very low. Carl Evans, now, the system of white supremacy is most to blame. Dr. O'Reilly, he said, hey, it took years of waiting, filing. Now, that's not, you have to labor constantly for those years, but it took a long time to wait to get the documents, and then the astronomical cost to get all the files, $4,000. That alone would be prohibitive for lots of us who has a spare 4K just for some moldy FBI files that might be redacted. You don't even know, what you're getting. Exactly. So that's not a coincidence, shall we say. That's not magic. That is the standard operating procedure by design. But I will submit humbly that I do think a contributing factor, we are not focused at all. One teeny tiny thing I will submit that I do agree with, where Dr. O'Reilly, where he said that the FBI, they are not omnipotent. And I hear people say that about whites in general. They are not omnipotent. They can't be everywhere and blah, blah, blah and all that. Even though he came back and later said that they, any of these groups, boom, 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 and all the rest of it, making it seem, that does seem like omnipotence with regards to black people, at least. Like, we're going to keep an eye on you niggers, which he said repeatedly. They just found all the black people. Okay. This is the same book where they talk about if you got $33 in the bank, we're going to be what you up to, Leroy. What you going to do with them $33? Where you going with them $33? How did you get $33? Like that type of, that seems omnipotent. Anyway, at least omnipotent-ish. Anyway, with regards to the niggers, I said, man, like, who has the time and such to, we haven't been on our assignment. Like, even if it took 4 years, like I said, it's not like you labor intensively for every day, right, for those years. Once you get everything done for the documents, which does not take years, which does not take months, and all of that, right? Even if you filed the request, FOIA request via paper, which you don't even have to do now. You can do it on your phone, online, whatever. I gave the address repeatedly. That, I'm trying, like, even if you're 17, high school, and it takes you something you don't know how to type, and this is your first time, even then, if I max it out, you don't turn off the TV, if it takes you 3 hours, okay, it's done in 3 hours, boom. And you wait. We have not been constructively focused on our job at all. White people with all their resources and technology and all the rest of it, yeah, they can spy on all of us. They could use the AI and social media and phones and all of that, but at the end of the day, if all of us, people that are classified as not white, especially people classified as black get back, especially us, right? If we were really serious about replacing white supremacy with justice, I do agree, he is correct. There's no way they could be Dr. Welsing to all of us and 19 years old. What you doing? Where you going? Who you hanging out? What you reading? What you trying? You going to school? You traveling someplace? You taking a vacation? Where you going? Like, there is no way they could do that with all of us. It has got to be you guys. Like, Leroy, we already there. Leroy can't read. Leroy been on that cell phone since he was 1. Leroy ain't gonna have no concern, no ability to replace white supremacy with we ain't got to worry about Leroy. Matter of fact, we got prison suit ready for Leroy right now. Or even just nonsense. We already know. Jamal, he's not gonna be trying to be the next generation of Dr. Welsing, Mr. Fuller, Dr. King, replace white supremacy with it. No, Jamal is on YouTube. Jamal is playing video. Jamal wants to be the next Pat Mahomes. Jamal is watching the NBA playoffs. We are not serious at all about replacing white supremacy with justice, like at all. Even if it's the mistake that Fuller said, well, we have valued survival more than justice. Now I'm going to tell you, that is a massive one. When I heard Fuller say that, like, whoo, that is totally incorrect thinking. Surviving without justice becomes worth less. I'm so glad we got to talk about that on the air before his transition, but I think that is one of the most important components of Mr. Fuller's counter-racism code as he has outlined things. Really gets at the what is our purpose for being here. Even if it takes 4 years to get the files, what is our purpose for being here? We have not been on our grind. If we were, they would have to spy on all of us, starting at age 15, age 10, out the cradle. They don't have to worry about that. Most of them, the spying would just be they were name-calling other black people, name-calling other black people, and name-calling other black people. That would be most of it. Not, and it not even, look, it wouldn't even be, boy, they were on Whitey something tough. Nope. Leroy and Lakeisha were about to kill each other, or the black people that were not born here, or whatever. Did you hear Oprah said? We have not been on our assignment at all. Period. I've said that throughout. That's one major, seeing that the FBI had Dr. Welsing under surveillance and got her files on her at age 19, like dozens of file reports starting at 19. Like, what? We have not been on our assignment at all. And recognizing that Dr. Welsing did all of her life's work. She was under FBI surveillance probably for like more than 60 years. Being afraid ain't no excuse. Per Dr. Welsing, get some courage. Being afraid ain't no excuse. Get it together. Like, we have not been on our job at all. Apparently, since we don't know nothing about John Burge, we don't even read no books. Didn't even read Racial Matters per Dr. Welsing's order. Worthy of great pity. Really, my version of that is we are Team Limp Noodle. Gus T included, not absolving myself. I'm trying to get off myself. Much obliged, retired firefighter, questioning about William O'Neill. That is disgraceful. Like, man, I didn't know that William O'Neill was a teenager like Dr. Welsing. Teenager in Chicago. And they go say, the devil, you Judah. No. The people who are most to blame are white. We got a black person to commit suicide because you didn't coerce. See, I said that you're going to come and coerce me into some incorrect behavior, and then I'm not. No. All of this is a response to whitey. That's who you. Matter of fact, same thing I said. Why is William O'Neill's name the one that we know? Who hired William O'Neill? That's one for sure. No. That teenager cannot be the person most to blame. Who hired him? If he had never been hired, you got to come and snitch, do some peeping on Fred Hampton and Mark Clark. If no one had asked him, told him to do that, we wouldn't even know his name. Who was the white person who hired William O'Neill? Who is the special agent in charge in Illinois who did all that? William O'Neill. Come on. That's what I mean. They lead us into that. That's not the story. Who hired, and how many other William O'Neills did they hire that we don't even know their names? He said that. He said it. We got bunches of Negro spies. We got Negro spies and Negro spies. And I told you, I already got that file. Dr. Welsing, 73, giving a lecture with 13 people. Negro spy present taking notes. Might be one of the 13. Context of White Supremacy. Spies for a day. It's lots of William O'Neills. Lots. They are not. And Fuller even said that. You can fuss at William O'Neill. Throw him off the bridge yourself. That doesn't solve the problem at all. They will just go get some brand new ones. Maybe they let you know who they are. Maybe they don't. But say they got lots of redactions in these files. Lots of redactions. Ernest C. Withers. Lots of redactions. They got 2. Oh, I think Eugene Robinson, I said he was with Minister Malcolm X, and then Joshua C. Davis's book, he gives one from Memphis. But he got 10 names? We got lots of Negro spies. Anyway, do they give classes on processing these documents? Do they have YouTube channel where they go over how you read these documents? Do they have that in school? Can you take a college class? Can you go to the community college and take a class on how you read FBI documents? Does that exist? That might be a skill worth having just to be able to decode, because they have lots of codes on those documents. I will say quickly before we wrap up, the JF, it must be really important that not all white peoples is racist. I don't know what come around. I don't know what that even means. And I'm so glad we got that story at the end, his personal familial connection to the Kennedy family. I'm just looking at logic. The great James Bevel didn't say Kennedy came around. He said the punk in the White House does not care about black children being savaged by racist barbarians in Alabama. That's what James Bevel said, name calling a white person rarity. Then and now, rarity. Minister Malcolm X name called a white person, that fox in the White House who took over the farce on. He wrote a whole chapter. That's one at minimum, man. Team Limp Noodle, Gus T. At the minimum, we read Minister Malcolm X. You only got to read the chapter on Icarus. That nonsense should stop. That JFK loved black people. Even if you can't read all of Racial Matters or Nixon's Piano, just read Minister Malcolm X's chapter on Icarus, and then you could listen to Message of the Grassroots. He talks about this in eloquent, accurate detail. And this is months before Kennedy died. So, if there was going to be some coming around, it should be here. This is the Kennedys at their racist, most manipulative worst. You going to hush the great John Lewis. You can't come out. You don't have freedom of speech. You got to say what we want. We ain't going to let you speak at all. Say what we want. Ain't going to let James. White people quote James Baldwin every 5 minutes. They wouldn't even let James Baldwin talk. Farce on the Fox. Man, no, I'm not going to say that the Fox. John Fox Kennedy. I'm not going to say John Fox Kennedy was not racist. I'm not going to say John Fox Kennedy came around, because I don't see no evidence of that right up into November of '63 when his brains are spilled out in Dallas's streets. I do not see that at all. Them snick sons of bitches, none of it. I see farce on Washington, per Minister Malcolm X. Manipulative through and through. Anyway, and you'll forgive me for not cutting a jig about the civil rights movement. Any hoodles. Anything else I want to make sure I get in? The triangulating, very important in terms of information. That way you can try to see what's accurate about what's being reported, all that good stuff, because white people do lie. Certainly at the FBI, white people lie. All of that said, much obliged for folks tuning in, hopefully worthy of your time and energy. We should be here, what is that? Oh, tomorrow. We should, so today, Tuesday, April 20th. I cannot say enough. The image that I used for promoting this broadcast from those FBI files, April 28, 1973, Dr. Welsing is giving a talk on racism, white supremacy, informant, present, taking notes. And my goodness, no coincidences. We're doing the broadcast today to discuss all of that. Great. I can't say even crazy. Woo! As it should be, being on our, I can't say our, because this wasn't no group effort, on my assignment. I just said we collectively have not been on our assignment at all. Not even close. We were all doing our best. I'm going to be Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. I'm going to be Neely Fuller Jr. I'm going to do my best. Replace. That's my reason for taking another breath, is to replace white supremacy with justice. If that's how we functioned, this problem would have been solved. They can't people on every 19-year-old in the world. We have been loafing out of this world. That really is the greatest takeaway that I've gotten from these documents at all. What have you learned from this so far? If they got the snoop on a 19-year-old, white people know this problem can be solved, and they have neutralized us. We're not even trying. We're not even, you better be coming and snooping on me. And Kenneth, nip. I'm good. I'm content with Mr. Fuller. We're going to do exactly what Mr. Fuller said is the worst thing to do. We value survival over justice. Dr. Welsing did not exist that way at all. Judge her record. That's why we talk. Did the FBI get involved in getting her terminated from Howard? Did she change her conduct after that? Absolutely not. That's it. Anything we need to get in? Oh, tomorrow. I didn't even say. We will be here tomorrow. Same time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We would talk about, since we have not been on our job, what happens to black children. Dr. Welsing was a child psychiatrist, third-generation physician, talked all the time about racism against black children. What happens since we have been loafing on our counter-racist assignment, cosmic assignment? What happens? 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific on Wednesday. So we'll be here every day through the rest of the week. Our guest tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Neutralizing Workplace Racism this Thursday. And then Catherine Massey Book Club on Friday. Oh, and Counter Racist Weekly Review this Saturday. Every day. Brass knuckles for Lion Michelle Alexander's new Jim Crow. John, see, if he had been talking to Michelle Alexander, question your intelligence. You ain't even got John Burge. You got a whole section on Chicago and nothing on John Burge. Maybe you went through the diploma mill to get that Stanford degree. Anyway, let's see. Much obliged, retired firefighter in Florida. The questioning about William O'Neill, maybe that's one thing, people who listen to the cows and actually pay attention. We're not going to sit around and blame you William O'Neill, you old coon, you done sold out Fred Hampton and your black brothers and sisters in Chicago. Like, are you serious. Retired firefighter in Florida, did you have anything quickly to comment on before we conclude?
Yes. The Kennedys bought the March on Washington, as you know, and they gave something like $800,000 to about 5 or 6 non-white black males who are heads or top people in organizations. And I mean, just my last thing I'm going to say, just remember the signs. The signs that the protesters had were professionally done. You know, I mean, no way that angry black people would be printing the letters so professionally as they were. Also, all of those buses to organize the buses. You know, black people had problems with buses in the South, especially. You know, but that's what they did. They're very crafty, and they got it all from their father, Joe Kennedy, who Roosevelt basically stated that he is such a criminal, I'm going to keep him near me, and so he made him the ambassador to England, which is very ironic for an Irish person to be that way. And so, I mean, you're right. I mean, it's important that non-white people, especially non-white people who are black, need to do some reading and studying history, because we do not know history to whereas we can make connections with things in order to get to the truth. And that's all I have to say. Thanks for listening.
Much obliged, retired firefighter in Florida. Certainly reading more important than watching television. I think Dr. Welsing exemplified that. Mr. Fuller exemplified that. Man, he read so many, but he read the newspaper, he read books, he wrote books. Reading massive and just serious study. We don't even, I mean, he is totally correct. We don't study history seriously, and so that we can, as Dr. Welsing would say, connect the dots, have a context for why things happen, why things look and function as they do. We don't even really stay abreast of things that are happening right now. Anyway, related to the system of white supremacy, racism, or much else that is, see, we'll know about Larry O'Brien. See, he threw that one in. We'll know about that, but serious things that are happening with regards to white, even their attempts at current legislation, make white people get up off of these COINTELPRO documents immediately. We're talking about things that happened 50, 60 years ago, and you, we can't talk about that. What? Everything, really, in my opinion, they should be released unredacted at this point. Like, all these people are dead for the most part, and even if it's an informant and they're 100 years old, like, are you serious? Who is going to track these people down at the old folks' home and not putting out of their hands, or you was an informant back when you was 25. We know what you did. Like, are you serious? Get out of here, man. All that stuff should be released unredacted. Let's see what you did. Hey, people don't even read, so I mean, it'd be like 5 people, asking for this stuff anyway. Really, that's another one. If this problem really can't be solved, why lie and keep all these secrets? You could just let us, especially now. Dr. Welsing's dead. Probably all the people involved are dead. Hey, it's been 50 years. Did the FBI order her to be fired from Howard? You could tell us now. What does it matter? The fact that you got to lie and be secretive about even all of that lets me further know this problem could probably easily be solved if we were serious and on our job. There, as they say, is the rub. We are not. Not even close. And what happens since we are not on our job? What happens to black children? 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific tomorrow on the Cows. Black parenting. Most difficult job in the world, bar none. Said that repeatedly. Get the confirmation tomorrow. That's it. Much obliged for folks tuning in, hopefully worthy of your time and energy. You should make because it should not even kind of bother me. He said you don't have thousands of people demanding the release of Dr. Welsing's files. Like, ooh, that kind of pricked me a little bit like, ooh-wee. That's probably true. We are lame. Like, we can't even, Dr. Welsing did all those talks and lectures for decades and all over the world. Book is still selling and guest on all those podcasts, and we don't have thousands of people. I guess you could say some of them, maybe they don't know about this, but I mean, dang, I thought she talked about the Howard thing all the time. I guess that could be it, but it seems like there should at least be like a few hundred people like, hey man, we want them Dr. Welsing files. Come on now. We'll get to the ballroom later, but we want them Dr. Welsing files right now. It's been a long time. Should have been a gang of us asking for years, right? Already. Worthy of great pity. Gus T trying not to be. Sobriety would be best. We had slightly more functional, high-functioning brain computers, not contaminated with the old mad dog. Maybe we'd have a few more dozens clamoring for those Howard files, FBI records, and such. Creator, we ask that you remind us, stop saying not all white people are racist. They had, remember, we all loved The Help, didn't we? I ain't going to read no Racial Matters. I'm going to watch The Help about 15 times. Love Viola Davis. Remember The Help? They had old John Fox Kennedy picture up on the walls. We love old John Fox Kennedy because not all white people are racist. Worthy of great pity. Creator, we ask that you remind us, stop name calling people classified as black. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cow signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. You're a victim. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my condition. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.